Would like to call to order the June 3rd, 2019 Board of Commissioners work session. Welcome, everyone. First item up is approval of our work session agenda, which you all have before you. Do I hear a motion to approve the work session agenda, including the changes on page 3? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. And we move now to discussion items, and we are happy to have first up our Innovation and Technology report from Debbie Brannon.
Todd Culp, who is our Chief Building Inspector, right? And Landon's going to drive. So welcome to our second innovation report here. If you'll remember last month in the first innovation report, I introduced you to 3 goals of our innovation initiative. Today's report is an example of an innovative idea put into action to create value for the citizens of Cabarrus County. The project checks the box for all 3 of our innovation goals. It empowers staff, it was created using existing resources, and it provides a dashboard to help staff visualize work status. But first, the backstory. All good Southern stories start with a backstory, and ours starts 10 years ago. Cabarrus County began using Acela for planning, permitting, inspections, and code enforcement in 2008. In 2015, we began partnering with the City of Concord on a shared Acela system with a goal to increase operational efficiencies and improve customer service. In 2016, the county and the City of Concord introduced a joint electronic plan review process with the goals to provide efficient and effective collaboration between the jurisdictions, departments, and our customers, to provide concurrent reviews where multiple reviewers can review, comment, and approve plans at the same time, and to streamline communications and eliminate conflicting comments back to the customer. In 2018, we were happy to have the City of Kannapolis join the collaborative Acela effort. There are many challenges to creating a multi-jurisdictional development system. Each organization and sometimes individuals have their own goals and ways of doing things. We have had and continue to have many meetings and considerable debate to tackle the scary and complex issues of working together on a shared system. County and city staff continue to collaborate and find ways to remove redundant requirements and streamline our joint workflow processes. Continuously improving and simplifying the development process requires a lot of changes to internal processes and workflows. Modifications have left quite a few orphaned records and records that were never updated with a proper status in our system. Before the development of this dashboard, we had over 2,000 records pending in the database that were not actually active plan reviews. These orphaned records made it difficult for the staff to identify the staff of active plans in process of review. Developing a dashboard to visualize these records allowed the team to clean up the records. The dashboard presents at a glance the number of plans in review and draws the staff's attention to plans that require action. And now I will hand it over to Todd Culp, Chief Building Inspector, and Landon Patterson, IT Business Systems Analyst, the stars of the story, to demo Cabarrus County's Plan Review Dashboard.
If you'll notice here, we have a commercial and a residential dashboard. Our department goal is plans get reviewed within 2 weeks. This time of year that we don't necessarily get all those in 2 weeks, but that is our goal. And you'll see here that the dashboard is set up in plans submitted under 15 days, and then 15 to 28 days, and then over 28 days. And the biggest help to us in this dashboard is that we can go back to the plans that are over 28 days and reach out to the developer or the contractor or designer, whoever submitted the plan for review, reach out to them and find out what's holding up their project. The residential dashboard, if you'll notice on it, it is set up in less than 5 days. Our goal is for a residential plan review to be reviewed and approved by our agency within 5 days of submittal. Again, those are sometimes lofty goals, but that is what we shoot for. You'll notice also that the plan reviews are a little high on that. We still have a few redundant older projects that we have to filter out yet on that one.
So the dashboard itself is using technology that we have from a vendor, which is ESRI, and they produce a lot of our GIS applications. They also have the ability for you to build out dashboards like this out of the box. So eliminate some of the custom coding, a lot of the in-depth stuff, and it's an existing system that we have on hand that we can just take and utilize and build something very quickly to help people visualize data that we have at the county here. So this dashboard gives you the ability to quickly, at a glance, as you can see any of the choke points that we have or any of the plan reviews that have gone too long, and you can see that with the cards in the center there. So you can see you have green, yellow, red. As it starts to get over to the red, those are plan reviews that we need to start checking and start taking a look at to see what's going on with those. And so it allows the user to also not only get that at-a-glance look at the records, but also to drill down a little further into the record and see how long the record's been there, when was its last status change. It also allows for our team and our staff to look at other municipalities. So you can select a municipality from the list up here, and the dashboard will filter to everything that's within that jurisdiction of that municipality, who's actually responsible for working with that plan review.
Excuse me, I need to get some clarification, please.
Sure.
On the plans there, plans reviews. Is that the number of projects that you're working on, or is that the number of reviews per project?
That's the number of reviews that we have pending.
But
Okay,
it's the
so
number
they
of
could be-
projects. It's the
Okay,
number of
total-
projects.
Total
Yes.
projects. Okay.
Projects.
Yes, that are awaiting approval.
Okay, I'm with you now.
Yes, there are multiple reviews within
Yes.
each project.
Yeah,
That's what I wanted clarity, so we could be looking at the right thing here.
right.
And they could be anywhere from a bit of a small retail space all the way up to a 1 million square foot building. So,
And so, like I said, this allows the users to get that at-a-glance view of everything, to drill down into the data. But we also allow our users to connect into Excel so they can pull up the record in a greater detail. So if you were to be a user and you're looking at items that have gone, let's say, over 28 days without a status change, you can go and ideally work the list of records.
You're still in Concord.
Yeah. Let me go up here and switch it. We'll switch back to Barris County. So you could ideally work on this list of records that have been pending, and you can go to Excel just by clicking a link, and you can view the record with greater detail and do whatever you need to do to close that record out or move that process along in a more efficient manner.
Okay, so why are we focusing on this? I think you all know we've got a lot of development going on. So traditional planning and zoning processes are dependent on manually moving paper plans between jurisdictions and departments, requiring a great deal of time and coordination. These processes, we have found, often frustrate our customers, requiring them to bounce back and forth between jurisdictional authorities. Each day incurs cost to a development project, impacting the developer's bottom line. And an efficient process can have a significant impact on local and regional economic growth and the development of a thriving community. So last month, I introduced you to Kaizen, a Japanese word that translates into good change. In business, again, it refers to activities that continuously improve all business functions and involve all employees from the top level down to the frontline employees. With this project, we're crossing additional boundaries to enhance our community. The multi-jurisdictional Excella shared system involves employees from multiple jurisdictions working together to find new ideas and implement changes to continuously improve our development services and functions. So what's next? Over the last year, our multi-jurisdictional team has been working on implementing a new service to improve our electronic plan review process. The new ePermit Hub service integrates with Excella and will provide many feature enhancements requested by our customers and staff. The new service will roll out this fall, and after ePermit Hub goes live, the town of Harrisburg will also join the multi-jurisdictional plan review process. And as you will hear in the next agenda item from Kelly Sifford, our Cabarrus County Planning Director, in 2020, we will begin implementing a completely new fee schedule structure for the county planning, zoning, permitting, and inspection areas. We will also be moving to building and trade permits to a blanket building permit, which includes all trades. And Todd Mike can explain a little bit more of that to you if you have any questions. Both of these items will require extensive changes to the county's Excella system configuration. So, in conclusion, I would like to put in a shameless plug for the June Employee Digital Book Club. We're reading or listening to this month The Art of Optimism by Jim Stovall. And with that, I optimistically look forward to reporting on more Cabarrus County innovation at your next work session. So, any questions or comments?
No, one brief comment. As somebody who uses a lot of GIS mapping, not necessarily this specific, in jurisdictions all over North and South Carolina, I can tell you, if you have a bad experience with that, you don't like the county. So the fact that people can get in, get the information they need, look, and it's easy to read and easy to sift through has a big impact on the way people will look at Cabarrus County, that we may not even are aware that they need it, want it, and so I'm happy that you guys are pushing forward and being innovative, so thank you very much.
Thank you. And Todd, you made a comment earlier when we were talking about how people sometimes look at our permitting process and decide on whether they're going to bring a project to a county based on what we're offering in that area. So, thank you.
I guess one question that I had, when something moves over into the red category on either of those dashboards, is that due to the person requesting the permit not submitting information, or is that on us? We've not moved. What causes that?
It could be a number of situations. It could be they don't have all their information submitted, or sometimes they'll drop the project for a while, and then we'll reach out to them and say, hey, are you still planning on moving the project forward? Or is there something that we're needing? We reach out to them and tell them exactly what we're needing. Right. And sometimes we're waiting on information back from them.
Right. And so when those projects move over into that red category, it's not necessarily anything to do with the county being slow about it. It's because the back and forth is not occurring.
Correct.
Okay. Great. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
That's an impressive system, and that collaboration between the municipalities, I think, is wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on our agenda from Planning and Development, as we just heard a preview, is fee studies presentation and discussion. We're happy to have Kelly Sifford and guests talk about this.
Thank you. They did give me a great segue, didn't they? So we are going to be talking about our fee study that we've been talking about for several months. We have got the conclusions now. I did want to kind of open it up and remind everybody from the start where things started and why we were moving this direction. So North Carolina the legislature chose to enact a new legislation at 153A 354, and I'm going to read a couple of sections of it, not the whole thing, but just so that you're aware of kind of what it says. A county may appropriate any available funds for the support of its inspection department. It may provide for paying inspectors fixed salaries, or it may reimburse them for their services by paying over part or all of any fees collected. It may fix reasonable fees for issuing permits for inspections for other services of the inspection department. Then it goes on in section C, and it says all fees collected under this section shall be used for the support and administration and activities of the inspection department and for no other purpose. So with that legislation coming about, and we haven't changed our fees in years, we decided to engage in a consultant to help us determine what our fees should look like. So we did engage Wolf Consulting. Chad has assisted us with a cost-based approach, which we have been using a value-based approach. So when people would come in, they would tell us how much their project cost to produce. And we were, relying on their accurate report of that, but it also has no relation to the time and cost that the county has in inspecting that particular structure. And the estimates can vary greatly, but our time doesn't change for that. So Chad has helped us with a cost-based approach. So he's worked with many jurisdictions in many states that require cost-based fee schedules where you're not over-collecting. He's going to go into detail how we calculated these, but as an overview, it's salaries, benefits, training, travel time to inspections, technology, support from other departments, anything that takes it necessary to make our inspectors get out in the field and go to work. Fire, construction standards, planning, IT, and budget staff worked on this project in varying capacities throughout, providing information, doing estimates, that kind of thing. And from there, I am going to give it to Chad. The clicker working?
Oh,
Oh, here it is. There.
this will move forward. While we're waiting for that, I just wanted to say thank you for having me today, this afternoon, and I want to tell you how excited I am really to be here for this for a couple of reasons. One is, in my travels, I don't get to the southeast very often, and this is a wonderful place, and so I was really excited to come here and spend some more time. And two, maybe the most important thing is, this means we're almost at the end. We're almost done with this. And Kelly mentioned the staff that were involved, and I want to reiterate that there was a lot of work to be done in this study, and you'll probably get a better sense of that as I go through some of the details. And the staff that worked on it had to really work hard. In addition to their regular jobs, working hard for the county, they had to spend a lot of time working on this study. And I really appreciate that and always want to thank them for that. So I'll obviously do that individually, but I wanted to make it a public comment here about that. So I have this presentation here to give a basic outline of the study, what we went through, the approach that we followed, the methodology. By doing so and having you understand that in some detail, I hope it builds a lot more confidence in the results. These aren't numbers that just went into a black box and showed up out and there's no meaning behind them. We spent a lot of time making sure these were right. And again, if you ever talk to any of the individual staff members who are involved, we spent a lot of time making sure everything was right. I'll go over the study results. So when you look at the worksheets or look at the report, and maybe they make a little more sense. I like to think they're pretty self-explanatory, but sometimes it's nice to have an explanation before you dig into it. Obviously, answer any questions that you have. Feel free to jump in anytime as I'm talking. If you need a clarification or just want to jump ahead to something, feel free. And then I'm also going to talk about what do you do with this information in the future. I don't believe you're being asked to make any decisions at this point, so we'll throw out some ideas of things to consider. Most of the things I'll point out are also in the report, so if you want to dig into the details, I think it's a 50-plus page report. It's long, and then the attachments are another 120 pages. So there's a lot there, and I realize that. So I want to kind of hit the highlights here to help you go through that. The scope of the study, we talked about it. It's a cost-based study. What we're trying to do is calculate the individual costs for individual fee services for the services that are being provided by staff. If there was an opportunity to identify new fees, for example, if there was something that the county departments were doing that they weren't charging a fee for and it was appropriate, whether you're planning to do it or just want to know what it costs, we put those in there. If there's a way to simplify fees in some manner, to make it easier for your customers to understand, to accept, appreciate, as well as for the staff to administer, we wanted to do that. And I think the blanket building fees, that's a big part of that, to make it real simple. It's also nice customer service for your contractors and developers and so forth to have fees that way. We looked at the cost of the services as you're performing them now. We didn't look 5 years into the future. We didn't do anything like that. It's pretty much the staffing and the cost that you have now. We didn't look at, we didn't do like a management study. We didn't look at whether they're doing it efficiently, effectively, whether they're providing good customer service, bad customer service, anything like that. But I'll tell you, I also do management studies. So if I'd seen anything and I thought, well, this is really terrible, it's run terribly and there's lots of improvements, you'd have a proposal now for me to come back and look at ways to fix that. So in general, everything seemed to be working nicely. Staff certainly seemed competent, and that sort of seems like damn by faint praise. They were excellent, not just competent. And so that was good. It was a very, very great study as far as I was concerned. I've done these studies in many states. I've done them for many years. I've done hundreds of them, and I found nothing deficient in this study at all. It was a really great experience from a professional standpoint. So we looked at construction standards, planning and zoning, and fire prevention. There's a little bit of a code enforcement built in there as well, because there's some relation of the enforcing these codes, and so there's a little bit of that as well, but there were no code enforcement fees per se that we're looking at. So let's talk a little about what we're looking at and what we're trying to accomplish here. There's lots of things that people call fees that are actually taxes, or they're actually an impact fee or something like that. So we're talking about a user fee. We're talking about a service that the county provides to someone in the public when they receive a private benefit. So this might be a homeowner who's getting something done for them in their home. It might be a developer for something they're building to make a profit or for some purposes like that. It's something that is caused by the fee payer requesting something. Now, I'm not going to say that they always want the service, right? They don't always want to be inspected. They don't always want their plans checked. But it's something they're starting, they're initiating, and therefore they're going to have to pay a fee for that. It's not on the basis of you just happen to own property here, or you just happen to purchase something, right? So it's not like that. Those are taxes. So we're really talking about these discretionary activities and the services that the county is providing in response to that. The thing to remember is, if I'm a citizen and I'm asking for a service and I don't pay for that service, it doesn't mean the cost doesn't exist, right? The cost is still there. It just means someone else has to pay for it. So that someone else is usually the general fund, right? So if you're not charging the full cost of service, your taxes or general fund is paying the difference. So you'll see when they talk about subsidy, that's really what I'm referring to as we go through here. Some examples of different things we think about it that are taxes or that are funded by taxes versus funded by fees. If something is 100% private benefit, like I'm going to build a home, that's for me and my family, that's entirely a private benefit. Usually we think of those as user fees paying most, if not all of that. Somewhere in the middle there is youth programs. We like to think providing youth activities. It's a general benefit to the community, but those people are getting specific benefit themselves. Long-range planning is something where we often think, yeah, there's some benefit to individual development and that kind of thing, but it benefits the community as a whole because we create a livable community, sustainable community, et cetera. And something like police patrol, we think of as something that is generally completely covered by taxes. We don't ask people to pay a fee every time the police or the sheriff drive down our street and check it out, right? So we think of that as taxes. There's obviously a continuum here of things and many, many different examples. I wanted to just throw some ideas out here. Obviously, you, as legislators, you think of it in ways you like with your policy, your kind of public approaches that you like to take. This is just a general construct to help you think about how I think about these fees as we go and put things together. Our methodology is a business case cost analysis. It's just like if an attorney or a dentist or anybody else is trying to figure out what they should charge for their services, they want to recover their cost. Now, they build a little profit, of course. We don't have that in here. But it's a very, very linear buildup. We take what is the time to complete something? Hours, right? How many hours does it take to complete something? What is the hourly rate of a staff member? A times B equals, that's the cost. Now, there's a lot of details in there, of course, and I'll show some of that later, but there's a lot of details, but we go through that to make sure that all those individual details are correct in the study. The analysis, as I said before, is based on the current county organization and your business practices right now. If there were situations where the department said, yeah, we have this particular process that we're doing, but we're building in efficiencies right now, or we have more electronic efficiencies coming into play, so we're not going to put as much time for something that we're doing it right now, but 3 months from now when the study is maybe in play, it's going to be less. So we took those known factors into account. The fees all relate to staff effort. It has nothing to do anymore with what it costs for the developer to construct something. It's no relationship to cost of materials. It's all about how much effort staff put into it. That's very, very important for these things to make sure we're talking about recovering the cost of staff, no more, no less. The fees vary. They vary based on size and complexity. That, again, is a reference to staff effort. If something is larger and more complex, then obviously it takes more time, or usually, not obvious necessarily, but usually takes more time, and therefore the cost would be greater. Something more simple, smaller, costs a little bit less. And I think any of the business people who are coming in applying for fees would understand that, right? Because it costs them to build, for example. If it's larger or more complex, it costs them more, just like it costs you more to provide those services. And what I mean by not based on tax concepts or revenue goals is we don't say, oh, we need $2 million this year. Let's divide that by how many things we're going to do, and that'll be our fees. It's not that simple. We don't back into these numbers. We build them from the ground up. As I mentioned at the outset, that we use the staff time to complete activities and services. We went to them individually, not individual workers, all of them, but as a department, and said, how long does it take each of these things? And then we said their direct time, there's overhead and support costs and supervisors, all that's built into there as well. That's the rational and fair distribution of overhead and support. One of the key things to remember there is we didn't just put overhead over and the support costs over the fees. We put it over non-fee activities also. So it's not like the fees are paying for all the overhead. It's spread fairly across all the activities that are done. Planning, for example, has a series of non-fee activities. There's long-range planning, things like that there's no fees for it. We identified the cost of those activities as well and included overhead in those. So it's a really fair way of doing it. It's the proper way to do it. We also developed some hourly rates so that if there was some situation that would occur where there's no specific fee for it, we have a way for the county to recover its cost to charge on a time and materials basis. Ultimately, what we do here is we identify the full cost of each of the individual units of service. That becomes, in my mind, the potential fee. That's your starting point to make a decision. Essentially what it means is that's the maximum you can charge, because that's anything above that you're basically charging more than full cost, and that's profitable. That's obviously up to you if you choose to make your fees profitable. I don't know what state law says about that. I think it says no, but I won't tell you what to do in that regard. Anyways, so that's our starting point. So all the results you see in the study, in the results tab, that's the full cost. That's your decision point to start from. You want to subsidize it? That's the start, right? That's the basis to do that. So I'll show you kind of a visual way, same thing I mentioned before. This here is a hypothetical fee, fee number one, if you will. And if you see there's intake, document review, I'm looking down the left column there, inspection and filing, and then there's the time for each of those tasks. So imagine any individual fee, any plan check, any inspection, there's going to be some intake of the permit, there's some documentation you have to look at, then you have to go out and inspect the site, then you have to put some documentation in the record, maybe communicate back to the client. And so in this case, it's about 4 hours in this hypothetical fee number one. If the hourly rate of that staff member is $100, then 4 hours times $100, $400. If there's $100 more of additional cost, that would be overhead, service supplies, vehicles, air conditioning, whatever. The total cost of that fee is $500. If the current fee is $300, that means you have a $200 subsidy on each unit of that. Fairly straightforward, right? What I want to impress upon you here is this is fee number one. We do this for every staff classification in each department and division for every single fee. We did this exact calculation 700, 800 times, 1,000 times. So staff had to provide this level of information on every single fee and at every staff position. So there were 7 positions, I think, in each division, and dozens to hundreds of fees, depending on the division. So there was a lot. If you were to see if you see the printouts at the end of the report, these are Excel spreadsheets, and they're massive. There's 120 pages of just printouts of those worksheets. Now you might have a better understanding. When I was praising staff and thanking them for all the work they did, they had to input all this information into worksheets. So it was a lot of work for them. Now, the thing that I want to impress upon you also is, yes, we put in these numbers, but we had lots of quality checks and cross checks, and I'll reference those in a minute. So we didn't just throw in a bunch of numbers and walk away and say, here's your results. It took months of labor to get it right, because there's lots of issues going on there. The other thing I wanted to point out is hypothetical fee number 1. If it's your current fee is $300, your cost is $500. If you do 10 of them a year, your current revenues would be $3,000. Your full cost is $5,000. So if we extrapolate all these out on an annualized basis, you'll see the subsidy, or in some cases there's a small profit. In this case, this is a hypothetical example of multiple fees. This is how, when we got down to the end, we identified hundreds of thousands of dollars of subsidy in some cases, in other cases tens. Yes?
Chad, can we back up on the previous slide?
Sure.
Because I want you to cover the annual volume of activity.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Explain that?
Annual volume activities, how many of each thing you do, how many of a particular type of permit. So in this case, fee number 1, you do 10 of them a year. And so we use that for a couple reasons. One is to extrapolate out the annual impact of revenue and cost. We also use it as one of our quality checks because we multiply all those time estimates by the annual volumes to identify how much time each staff member was consumed in this work. And there's only so much time available. So if we were showing more time than available, we know there's some imbalance. So we spent a lot of time balancing to make sure we got that correct.
So in reality, where we're showing 10 as an example, it could literally be hundreds.
Yes.
Is that right?
In some
Kevin?
cases, it was hundreds.
Or
Yes.
maybe even more than, considerably more than that.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, that reminds me, one other thing to mention is there are some fees that you haven't done in years. There are certain activities, certain buildings, certain occupancies that you haven't done in years. We still calculated the fee because one could show up tomorrow. So even if it's something that there's no real recent history of it, we still calculated the cost of it to make sure it's there for you should it show up tomorrow. So this is just a graphic to show you when you see the bottom line totals, or in the report, there's some summary tables of revenues or potential revenues and annual costs. This is how we derived it. It was extrapolating each of the individual units times their annual volumes and gave us a figure, and then we added those all up. So there's a couple tables in the report itself, including the executive summary, that show this. You'll see one in a moment as well. We put in this study every single legitimate cost that should go in there. So if you think about a planning and zoning fee, it's not really a planning and zoning fee. It's a Cabarrus County fee that just happens to be administered and operated by planning. But planning doesn't exist by itself. It has some support from human resources and from finance, et cetera. And so there's actually some cost of that. It comes through your countywide overhead cost plan. And that's what I referenced down there by countywide administration. But there's also support between divisions. There's support from management and supervisors within the division. There's obviously salaries and benefits, but I mentioned before vehicles, electricity, having an office space, et cetera. All that's built in. Now, it's a layer cake, obviously. There's not huge amounts of countywide administration. It might be pennies within a $1,000 fee, but it's in there. So we really have that all built in. And there's nothing in there that doesn't relate somehow to support of the department, support of the division, or direct services itself. There's no just stuff thrown in there. So the methodology specifically, I mentioned calculating an hourly rate or using hourly rates. We take the cost of the position, that's salaries and benefits combined, and we divide that by the number of billable hours. And billable hours aren't the pay hours. we often call them productive hours. It's how many hours are actually available in the day to do inspections and plan checks, et cetera. We take out things like holiday vacation, sick leave, training, that kind of thing, which are things that you need to recover because it's part of the work that's being done. It supports the work, but it isn't something you could bill to a specific permit. You can't put, oh yeah, I'm going to put a 1/10 of an hour of vacation time in this permit. So we take that out of the hourly rate calculation so that the hourly rates are built up to recover that in each hour that they're able to recover. To give you a specific number, the hourly, the billable hours is, if we start with 2,080 hours of a full-time employee, it's roughly 1,400 to 1,500 hours a year is the available hours or the billable hours, productive hours sometimes. I generally don't use productive hours because it sounds like they're being non-productive, and there's some connotations to that, but you know, there may be some actual productive time like training, et cetera, that they're doing. Then we take that cost per hour, we multiply it by the time to complete the task, just like I showed you in the other worksheet, and that gives us the cost of service. And anyways, the rest are, you have the slides if you want to read the specifics here, but they're just some of the background details that don't require full description. So here's our results. So the full cost of planning and zoning, and by the way, these are only fee-related services we're looking at here. Each of the divisions does, or departments, they do some non-fee related activities. I mentioned advanced planning for planning and zoning. Fire prevention does certain things as well that is not fee-related. And I think construction standards may have a thing or two as well. So this is only fee-related activities. So these won't match budgets or anything like that that you see. We can tie it back if we need to, but they don't match it now. So planning and zoning, their cost for fee-related services is around $583,000 a year. They bring in about $66,000 in revenue. So they are subsidized by other funds to the extent of $517,000 a year, and they recover 11% of their cost. Construction standards, their cost is about $3.5 million. They bring in about $3.4 million. And so their subsidies around $100,000, or they recover 97% of their cost. That's pretty good. Traditionally, when I do these studies, what we see, if you haven't had a study done in a very long time, that planning is under-recovered significantly, and construction standards or building is either very close or they're over-recovered in some cases. This shows a typical situation. So I don't see anything odd here in my experience. It's pretty typical. I am surprised that construction standards is doing such a good job recovering. I think they must have done some fee increases over the years. Basing things on valuation tends over the last decade or so to really decrease building revenues and recoveries. So they've done a really good job there. In fire prevention, their cost for fee-related activities is $91,000. Their revenue projection based on current fees is $18,000. They are being subsidized around $73,000 a year. They recover 20%. So that's the individual records. If we were to, let's say tomorrow, you were to increase all fees to full cost recovery. And by the way, there are some fees that are set now at overcharging. So there are some potential that could come down. This is assuming everything is either increased or decreased to full cost. You would recover another $704,000 a year in brand new revenue. Okay? And that would bring you up to 100% cost recovery. Now, I throw that figure out knowing full well that even if you wanted to tomorrow, you couldn't raise everything to 100%. There's lots of fees where you would, it's traditional to subsidize them. In building and construction standards, water heater permits is a classic one. Everywhere I go, nobody charges 100% for a water heater permit, because if you did, you'd never see another application for a water heater permit, and you'd have exploding water heaters, and it's a public safety problem. So there are some other things like that. Appeals, historical review, things like that are very traditionally subsidized, and those are things I think staff have gone through or will continue to go through to determine whether you would even try to seek 100% cost recovery for those. So I know $704,000 is a big number. Even though I throw it out like, yay, look how much money you could get, you really probably wouldn't. So this is a graphical representation of the same things. I want to point out red is general fund, and blue is fees. So buildings in the middle, construction standards, I should say, is in the middle, fire to the right, planning and zoning to the left. You can see graphically the most revenue and cost is in construction standards. The other two are smaller, and so construction standards doesn't, because they don't fully, this doesn't exactly tell the picture. The big bar doesn't say they're offsetting everybody else, obviously. It's just in their own case, they're almost recovering full, just like the tables before showed. Just a summary of those. Overall, you're recovering 83% for everything. That's because the large Department of Construction Standards, or division, excuse me, is doing a better than average job. Mentioned full cost is usually considered the maximum potential fee. Your direction and policy later will determine whether those are going to occur individually. And without any increases or any changes whatsoever, even without all the increases, the general fund will continue to subsidize those private activities. Or if you're not using taxes to subsidize those, if there's some sort of fund that's offsetting it, any drawdowns from those will continue. So just to reiterate a couple things, the tables and reports that you're going to see in the written report with the attachment, as well as the tables that I've shown you today, those are the full cost of service versus what your current fees are. We extrapolate them to annual figures so that you can have a kind of big picture view of it, in addition to the individual fee-by-fee comparisons. And your fee revenues, as I said before, it's really going to depend on what you do, first and foremost. Secondly, what's going to happen in the economy, in the local construction activity. If you have booms, everything goes up. If you have some things go up and some things go down, it's going to change. That mix will change things. So I can't sit here today and say, here's how many dollars you're going to get. Tomorrow it's going to change. Something in the local economy could change in the next few weeks. That could change. So that's a little bit of consultant caveats. I can't promise you any numbers. I'd love to say, here's $700,000, but that clearly won't happen, and different things will happen as we go along. So that's enough on that one. So when you look at the individual tables, this is a truncated version of what you're going to see. You're going to see an individual fee-by-fee list. They're broken down by zoning and planning, by construction standards and fire prevention. And there's two examples from each of those there. I think there might be 3 from building. So temporary use, for example, you'll see on an individual basis, you'll see the current fee shown. You'll see the full cost per unit. In this case, your current fee, these are actual results. Your current fee for that temporary use permit is $100. The cost we calculated that is $334. So your current subsidy is $234, and you're recovering 30% of that. So you'll see that kind of thing in every single, for every single fee that you charge or you could potentially charge from the study, as well as some non-fee activities that we just wanted to show what they cost. You'll see here that I don't have numbers for the remodel or the office. It says varies because that cost, your current fee, depended entirely upon the self-reporting of that developer, what they said that would cost to construct it. And obviously what it costs to construct it will vary on location, building materials, what crew you use, what kind of profitability that person has, et cetera. So there's no way to say, here's what your cost is to do this kind of comparison. So that's a little bit of a cop-out there, but there was no way to do it. But I still wanted to show you what's going on there. For fire prevention, they had kind of standard fees there. So the cost of the plan check inspection for a new construction, 10,000 square foot office is $150. Everything was $150. Their cost was about $684. And so they're subsidizing $534 on each and every one of those. Now, some of those are very small in volume, so that's not a big impact on your revenue. It's not a big impact on your cost, but others have dozens to hundreds. And you can see in the report where we have those annual volumes built in there, and you look at the revenue impact of individual fees and see fee by fee what kind of impact it has, what kind of subsidies you have on an individual fee basis. So this I'm just showing you to help you look at and understand the big worksheets later, because they're huge, and if you need reading glasses, I suggest you have them handy when you're looking at it. The printouts are very small time. So to summarize planning specifically, I went through the individual numbers before, but I want to point out that 99% of their current fees under recover full cost. There's one fee, it's actually a fine, for zoning violation or citation that was over recovering currently, but everything else was under. 100% of staff rates were less than full cost, significantly so. And that's important because in some cases you may need to charge staff rates instead of individual flat fees. In those cases where there's no way to determine what it is, maybe it's something that can vary so much, so you're going to charge hourly rates. So we have those staff rates available now. And most of the costs that you have in planning in the fee-related area that we're looking at, they're certainly recoverable if you like. And when I say are recoverable, they're commonly recoverable. There's no legitimate reason why you couldn't. The only reason you wouldn't is if you chose as a policy matter to not. If you chose to subsidize it to incentivize or disincentivize some activity. So let's talk about building for a moment, or construction standards, because this is a big change for the county. We actually identified, and we've referenced this before, but we identified a cost-based approach to calculate building fees. What you did before, and are as this very moment until you implement this new fee, so that hasn't changed yet, so I don't want to get ahead of myself here, is when someone came in and told you the valuation of their project, whether it was a office building or a deck or anything like that, they said, it's going to cost me $1 million to build, it's going to cost me $300 to build. And your fees were a percentage of that. And so whatever they said, you charged on that basis. So what we do now is, and as you can imagine, the difficulty of that, linking that to your cost is, A, they could underreport. I don't know how much that happened. There's no way for me to know. B, let's say they use finer construction materials, finer marble, gold-plated everything. It doesn't change your inspections. It doesn't change your plan checks, and yet you would charge them more for that. Conversely, if they came in and they used really cheap materials and really cheap labor, their fee was really low, even though your time to plan check and inspect was no different. And so there was no link, there was no nexus between what you were charging and the service and work that you had to do on behalf of that project. And so we fixed that, or we potentially have fixed that for you. So essentially now, we've identified what it costs to do these things. What does it cost for a 10,000 square foot office? The plan check and inspection of it, regardless of materials, regardless of which crew does it, regardless of how in demand the developer is, and so, or the builder is, and so they could charge a higher rate, is all about the staff effort. And so it's entirely based on that. We calculated unit cost by unit cost, each fees on that basis. And what that's going to do is a couple things. One is, when the economy turns around one way or the other, let's hope this doesn't happen. Let's say the economy tanks a little bit, or construction activity tanks a bit. We saw this 10 years ago, where all big buildings stopped. All that was left was remodels or upfits and things like that. And so usually when you're in a valuation base, upfits and that sort of thing are grossly undercharged. And the big buildings made up for it. When you run out of big buildings, either because you build out or because the economy went down, then you don't have the things to recover everything else, so you're losing money on everything. And so what this does is says every single activity pays its own way. It's a completely fair way to do it. Now, there are policy decisions on this too. Sometimes it's nice to have a big building come in and pay for all the little mom and pop stuff. But that's only good when there is a big building coming in. And when they stop coming in, you don't have the revenue to fund your operations, and it causes problems there. So that's what I mean by enhanced cost recovery performance and adaptation to market changes. It's also more accurate, it's more fair, and it's certainly more defensible, because we can point to how long it takes, what that hourly rate is, there's our fee. That's not really challengeable. People may not want to pay it if they just don't want to pay more, but we can point out this is what it costs, and we can do it with great confidence. Now, one thing I'll tell you, and I've heard some feedback in this regard, is when I've spoken to developers, and I haven't in this community at this point, they will say, this is okay. We like this because we know we're not going to get ripped off. We know it's fair. We just want it done fast. We just want our projects turned over very quickly. That's what's important. And so this actually would help in that regard, because it helps fund the level of service you need to do to provide that level of service. So, or fund the staffing, I should say, to provide that level of service. Oops, went too fast. Okay, that was the background on construction standards. Their summary again is that their overall cost recovery is 97%. Essentially, I told you we can't do a fee-by-fee comparison because you don't know the cost. So what I did is I compared the overall projected revenue for the end of this year with the overall projected cost, or the overall cost, budgeted cost. That's where we came up with the 3.4 versus $3.5 million. And most service costs that you have in construction standards or in building fees are recoverable. There's very few things that you can't. I don't know of any that you can't, just there are some that are generally desirable from a policy perspective, or commonly desirable from a policy perspective to subsidize. In fire prevention, they have 96% of their fees under recover full cost. That's 21 out of 500 fees. And, excuse me, I'm sorry, those are the exceptions. So the 21 out of 500 new construction fees are under recovering. Excuse me, try again, over recovering. And 2 out of the miscellaneous fire fees are over recovering. The rest of them are under recovering. And all of the staff rates, again, are less than full cost. And again, as with the other departments, most everything that we included as fee-related services are recoverable if you desire to do so. Fire prevention, sometimes there's a long history of not charging full cost. That tends to fall back into when it was engine companies going out and doing it. It just seemed like a good community thing to do. Now it's really part of the construction review process, that sort of thing. So I see in this field that fire is more and more and more trying to go to 100% cost recovery for these kinds of fees we've included here. Overall, everybody has a fee subsidy. 98% of the fees in planning and fire are subsidized on an individual basis. That's counting them, tally. The primary cost recovery opportunity or cost improvement opportunity is for increasing fees towards full cost. There aren't a lot of new fees, like we found a bunch of things that you're doing that you're not charging for, and we say, hey, go out and start charging for these things. You're doing a pretty good job at that already. Or they were things where if you're not charging it, there's a really good reason that you're not charging and you plan to continue to do that. The restructuring building fees in 2 ways. One is the cost-based approach and also the blanket fees. It's really gonna help cost recovery. It's not gonna change overall for that division, but obviously on a project-by-project, fee-by-fee basis, it will increase. Generally, what I find in construction standards fees, building fees, is as a facility gets larger, it tends to be overcharged. As something gets smaller, it tends to be undercharged. And so when you go to a full cost-based recovery, there's a little increase here, a little decrease there to kind of balance back into the middle. That's almost universal these days, is that's the setup. So just a reminder, we're talking about activities, I'm gonna reference some ideas and considerations for when you start thinking about setting fees, setting the levels, implementing them, et cetera. And just a reminder that we're talking about fees that have a private benefit here. We're not talking about taxes. We're not talking about community benefit unless you decide that some of these fees do provide a community benefit. I have been in jurisdictions where they say, we believe X provides a community benefit, even though this individual developer is getting a private benefit out of it. It does benefit the community. We want this. Let's do it. The other times I've seen it is there's been situations where there's a part of town where there's a little blight, something like that. They'll say, we're going to reduce all building fees in this part of town to, or subsidize building fees in this part of town to encourage facade development, things like that, or building or tearing down, or whatever you want to incentivize. There's obviously ways to do that. Fairness and equity is an important thing to me, that everybody pays their fair share. So when I do fee studies, that's what I'm identifying. What is the fair share for each fee payer to pay? You want to make sure, obviously, that either it's consistent with existing public policy or you create new public policy to fit what you want things to happen, what you want to incentivize, disincentivize, whether you want to recover costs or continue to subsidize and contribute to these departments. In some cases, social impacts, affordability is something to consider. If you have lower income areas and you want those fixed up, I was referencing before, maybe there's some blight, you might change what you do there. And of course, revenue impacts. If you want more money, if you need more funds to do more, this is a way to do it. It's a completely legitimate effective and appropriate way to do it if that's your choice. There is some impact on these fees, or the fees could have impact on these market factors. Traditional economic principles of supply and demand, pricing, if you price it too high, certainly sometimes water heater permits is a great example. As I said, if you create a water heater permit that's too high, and people go down to Lowe's or Home Depot and their permit is $300 and the water heater itself is $300, they think, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to pay for a permit what it cost me to buy this thing, and they just don't do it, right? So there's good reasons to have it done, and staff will come in with ideas about what to subsidize and not. State law, local principles, general legal principles, general government principles of not making a profit. You certainly should consider all of those as you go through this. My study references some of them, but of course you would consult with your county council to determine what other things might be there. Some other factors that you might consider are comparable fees. One of the things I did is a comparison study, and it was extraordinarily difficult to do that comparison study. And that's because looking at, I believe it was 10 or 12 different other jurisdictions, some cities and counties that surround you or comparable in some way, they don't all call the same thing the same thing. They don't have the same fees. Some of them charge almost nothing. Some of them don't even charge for certain things that you are. So there's a huge mix. I could not come up with any conclusions to say, here's what you should do based on there. Here's how you fit with everybody else. I presented the data and basically had to say, here. I mean, there's no conclusions that you could reach from here. It was so different. And that's common that there are a lot of differences, when I do these comparisons, but this one was off the charts in terms of how different it was community to community. So you could do that. You could try, make sure if you like to be in the middle or you don't mind being high or you want to be the lowest, you can look and find some examples of there, but it would be very, very, very difficult and time-consuming to figure out anything definitive there. The other thing you might want to consider, and I referenced it before about perhaps low-income areas or something like that, as well as what constituencies are affected, whether it's something where you decide that you want the development community to thrive and you want to subsidize that, and you want to encourage that and really give them a lot more leeway. That's something you could do. You could do that in certain areas of town, whether it's either if it is low income or it's an area that you just want to see developed, so you incentivize that area. There's lots that you can do there, and you have lots of opportunity there. Some other things as you're going through this, remember that we identified the cost and subsidization of current services. That's all. It's the cost is really independent of your fees or revenues, meaning that if you change your fees, it doesn't change the cost. The cost is the cost. That's what it costs you to do that. The only way the costs change is if your staffing or your process change. If you want to lower the cost, you got to lower the cost. I hate to say this kind of thing, but you lower the cost of staff, or barring that, because that's obviously not something you can do every day, is lower the amount of time it takes to do those services, which is an efficiency issue. Right? I mentioned before, I didn't see any gross inefficiencies. You have good management there. If they saw gross inefficiencies, they would fix that. I heard a lot of things about they really care about their customers and don't want to overcharge them, so they're looking for things to make it better. So that's not the way. The cost is the cost. It's always there. So if you don't charge it, you're always going to subsidize it. Okay? It doesn't go away. One of the things that I hear sometimes in public meetings like this very often is somebody will come up. I do a lot of these studies in California, and I'm California-based, as a matter of fact. And there are tax advocacy groups, GAN Group, et cetera, Jarvis Group. If you've ever heard of Prop 13 in California, they're the ones who basically pushed and won that in California. Members of them sometimes will come to these public meetings and say, you can't raise your fees. Taxes are too high already, right? You can't raise your fees. Taxes are too high. They forget that the fees, if they're not raised, taxes is making up the difference every time. And so if you don't want taxes to pay for this kind of stuff, you have to raise the fees. Otherwise, taxes are covering for it. And again, that's a policy decision. It's perfectly fine. But just to understand what's going on here. In my experience, I've been doing this over 22 plus years. these specific exact kind of studies. And at first there was a lot of, hey, we want to continue to subsidize, but nowadays it's more like these studies are brought on because we want to recover our costs for these services. We want to provide more police and fire or parks or other general fund type activities, so we want to stop subsidizing with general fund money. That's a common situation. So going to 100% cost recovery is almost always legal. There are some fees that by law are set below cost, perhaps. It's always legitimate, and most cities and counties, that's what they're trying to do. But as I've said many, many times, I'll probably say it again before we're done, subsidies is a perfectly legitimate and appropriate and excellent public policy when you decide that you want to do that. On any of these, you really want to consider public benefit for these activities. If there's a public benefit, that's a definite reason for subsidizing. If the public's going to benefit, have the public pay for some of that, right? That's definitely something to consider as you go through this. So I'm not necessarily going to read through all of these for you. I assume we all can read in here. So this is on your handout or on your screen, so you can get through it if you want. So I'll hit some of the highlights. Essentially, you want to look at that public policy question. Do these projects, and you can do this on a general scope. You could even do it on an individual project scope if you choose to. If you want to kind of open that can of worms and say, does this project bring us a public policy benefit? If so, maybe we subsidize that. Maybe that's a policy that we've built in. So whether it's planning or fire services or whatever, what should it be subsidized and then how much? Okay, should some types of projects or sizes subsidize others? Is that a good plan? Will the subsidies incentivize or disincentivize certain activities, et cetera? So really, these are things to think about as you're going through your determination of what you want to do as a public policy here. So when you decide what you want to do, there's some ideas for implementation. If we're looking at some planning fees that if you went to full cost might triple or quadruple or whatever, we want to make sure, perhaps, that this doesn't shock everybody and create this huge uproar, so you may consider phasing them in. We're going to get to 100% cost recovery because we've decided that that's our goal, but we're going to take 3 years to do it, or 5 years to do it, or whatever. We're going to increase them incrementally year by year. That's something that you might want to consider. Other things to consider are, what are our cost recovery levels? If you say we don't want to be 100% cost recoverable, we deem there to be a 10% public benefit to building permits, so we're going to get to 90%. And you can combine those. We want to get to 90% over 3 years, right? These are all things that you can do. Timing, when are they going to happen? Probably can't do it tomorrow. Don't want to do it tomorrow. You may decide July 1 sounds great or January 1 sounds great because we want to talk to our customers. We want to give them time to build it into their budgets and into their estimates and contracts, et cetera. So maybe we're going to give it a few months. We're going to let them know now it's coming, but we're going to give them a few months. That's part of customer service as well, communicating it to them, sending out notice to them. If projects are brought in right now, maybe they get to be grandfathered into the current fee structure, and even though their project may go into the next year and into that, those are things to consider. Very often what happens, as you can imagine, if you create a grandfathering policy, you'll get a huge flood of applications. That huge flood of applications, many of them will be very, very insufficient. They will just want to beat the window, but it's garbage, and you'll spend a lot more time fixing them through corrective noticing and so forth. So you want to think about that as you go through that and make sure that if you have a grandfather process, that you have some sort of policy in there that yet they have to be adequate and complete in order to be in there. The other thing to consider is, what do you do in the future with these fees and these costs? So we've determined these costs based upon FY 18-19 dollars, right? Budgets, expenditures, salaries, and benefits. But as soon as July 1 comes around, and the next July 1, your July fiscal year, yes. So, every July 1, there might be cost of living increases. Certainly there's inflation that occurs. So you want to keep your fees up to date, or if you choose to, you want to have some sort of policy or approach to do that, whether it's CPI, whether you do fee study updates. here's a key thing. I don't recommend annual fee study updates. I don't think you need them. So I say do some sort of inflationary factor. And there's many of those that you could choose. My report outlines several of them. My general recommendation is to use in-house costs for that rather than a general regional CPI, because the regional CPIs tend to be really, really insufficient to keep track with your actual costs. They've been probably under, I think they're 3% so far this year-ish. Prior years have been 2% or below. Not that long ago was negative. So it's something to keep in mind that plain old CPI is very, very insufficient to keep track with real costs in local government. Okay, that's the end of my prepared comments. I'm available for as many questions as you feel you'd like to ask.
Lauren, if you could bring up one of the spreadsheets for them to take a look at the volume, that would be helpful. I will go ahead and talk for a minute, and if you all have questions, you can pipe in. So obviously the blanket permitting's been discussed several times now. We hope that that will be streamlining for the customer. And it will also, with our system, help some access issues that we've had with other people being able to get access and do what they need to do in their project. When somebody submits it, and there's been some limitations in the system about how the contractor gets a hold of things and all that, so we think it'll solve some of those problems as well. Again, we discussed the fact that there are some new fees in there that we are proposing. We did have a reserve put in here of $200,000, hopefully for the first year. The idea is for, you all remember when we had the recession and we lost all the inspectors and we couldn't get any after that. So this could be used to retain in low periods or potentially be used for capital purchases such as the vehicles we use. So something to think about on that. Again, these are true costs for salary and support. He did do the comparative fee document for your review. However, as we pointed out multiple times now, the fees that we and other people are charging have nothing to do with the actual cost of providing that service. And what that service cost here versus what that service cost in another county may not even be comparable. Having said that, staff did some additional research in order to make some recommendations to you on some items. We figured that you would probably like us to pare that down for you somewhat and give you some suggestions on things that we thought potentially should not be 100% for one reason or another. Usually related to, a good example is decks. If he said it costs $300 for you to buy materials to get the deck, and then it costs you $300 to get a permit to do the deck, we're afraid people won't permit, and Commissioner Honeycutt knows what a problem that is later on when you go to sell. So there's some things like that that we wanted to put in there just to convenience for everybody. Let's move this along and make sure that people comply so that it simplifies things in the long run. We have on the screen up there now is the start of the fire in the building recommendations. So it is very tiny, but you're going to have plenty of time to look at it. So it has columns in there showing current cost, what would be the projected, and what we're recommending. And they have some notes out there beside them to help you with our thoughts on why potentially that may not be 100% collection item. Planning has a separate sheet on that one where, again, we've done a lot of research around to try to come to a amount that is not going to be 100% recovery, but will be improved recovery over what we have today. So I'm going to give you this today for you to look at. I'm planning on coming back to the July agenda session. So in between, we'll give you plenty of time to look at this. You can contact us. Everybody's here that worked on it. If you have questions regarding particular items, Todd, Matt, Steve, and Susie all worked on it in detail. So you can contact any one of us, depending on what the subject matter is, and we'll be glad to kind of talk you through that. So that is what that is. Implementation, Chad alluded to that as well. Todd Shanley is here. You want to come up, Todd, talk for a second about, we are working on reconfiguring Acela, because this is a wholesale change in the way that it will calculate the fees. And so it will require significant reconfiguration. So Todd, you want to talk about that?
Basically, that we have contracted with Acela, or we're about to contract with Acela based on, we're waiting for the outcome of this meeting and the next before we actually finalize that. But it'll be 232 hours of work for Acela to refit the processes and the fees and make that sustainable. So the key with that is that, as Chad mentioned, with the changing annually of the fees, we want to make sure that we can do that without having to go back to Acela every year to do this. We need in-house staff to be able to make that reproducible.
And also, Chad mentioned communications. I have discussed with Kasha, we're starting to get together our ideas about how we're going to communicate this. She is planning on tying it to some education, so why do you really want your water heater or your deck inspected, so that people understand their benefit personally to why it gets inspected, and then, of course, tying it back to the fees. And so we have, Todd met with the building group a couple of months ago, home builders, and did discuss with them that we were going to blanket permits and that we were working on a fee study. So they have not seen these results. These are the first time that they've been displayed publicly. So we wanted to get them to you first. So kind of that concludes what I had for today. Do you have questions?
Got two questions. So at what point will you, I guess this is public now because it's out, so at what point will you get feedback from the home builders and some of those people to provide to us?
We can schedule a meeting with them. If you would like us to schedule a meeting with the home builders, Todd and I can arrange for that to be done.
I mean, I know we've had a meeting with them and they're seem willing to pay more to be able to move things through.
Correct.
You know, from that perspective. So, and then the other piece is, do you know from the recommendations that you have on these charts with what you're recommending we do, what the bottom line number, where his number was 704,000, what the number would be for what you've recommended?
So we've got it in the charts. I know you can't see it right now, but each one of those charts has his our current fee, his recommended fee, what we're recommending, and the difference, well, on the building. Susie showed them one way. I think hers was a % of collection for the total. So if it costs $100 to do it, she's showing you that she's recommending 30% on that item. So it's on each sheet. This sheet is just the fire in the building, because the fire in the building were a little easier to put together because they're structured similarly. Susie's planning fees were a different structure, so to speak, so that's on the second sheet, so that's what you're looking at now. So she just pulled it up. So you can see there, but you can see the difference between what it is currently, what it would cost to do it, and what we are recommending. And we wanted somewhere for you to start with, so this was after we researched and kind of said, okay, what's reasonable that we can get compliance and all of those things. And so, you know, again, these are open for you to change in any way you wish to, but we just wanted you to have a starting place.
And I think I understand what you're saying there. And the number may be here and I might be missing it, but based on the same numbers that he used to calculate the 704,000.
Okay.
Do we have that number for your increased fees?
No.
Is there a way to kind of, y'all work through that and give us that number, or?
Not exactly. The reason being is it goes back to this value-based. So if I have a 1,000 square foot house and two different builders come in, and so I'm doing nice, beautiful fireplace and marble and all that, and somebody else is doing an affordable house that just has the basics. What they're telling us is this one's going to cost this much, and this one, so one's going to cost $100,000 and one's going to cost $50,000. And so there's no way for us to take the current projections and be able to roll those over. So that's why we showed the totals. Overall, what is happening is residential is going up and commercial is going down. Now, there are some additional fees on commercial for fire that were not in place to begin before. But overall, most of the fees are going up some. I think the other caution, and I think we're already seeing some of this, is the only way to do this was how many units of that did you do last year? And so we gave him units, how many we did last year. Well, this year, we are seeing very different numbers on things, and we were just doing some research earlier. So I ran the numbers from July 1st through May 30th from 17-18. The estimated value for that period was $613,997,718. For that same period this year, it was $518,231,305. So we just don't have a way to show that like we would like to, not accurately.
And are there any other groups other than the builders that you guys would expect to receive input from, or is it more individuals after that, or?
I'm thinking individuals, general public, developers are kind of more one-off, so there's not a particular group to reach out to for that, but, this is televised, as you know. And so I'm sure you'll be hearing from it, and Todd and I will get a meeting scheduled with the home builders, because they're the primary ones we talk about with this.
Kelly, go ahead.
I just want to make sure we're not just including home builders. We need to have a sample of the commercial contractors as well.
Kelly, on the chart, the one prior to that one,
Yes.
where you talk about carnivals and fairs, permits, that type of thing?
Correct.
So I'll understand this better. The current fee is $150, and the full cost is $1,009. Now, so that I can understand the difference between the two, in this particular case for carnivals, what does that $1,000 that's full cost, what does that cover? Does that cover the whole fairground, or does it cover each individual vendor? And the reason I'm asking that is because I'm like everybody. I go to the fair every year for a lot of reasons.
Right.
And I make it a point to talk to some of the vendors there, particularly the ones that's paying us to be there.
Correct.
And I'll be honest with you, the only complaint, they love the fair, they love the people, they love Cabarrus County, all of those things. But what they ever one complain about to me is, why do you have to charge so much? Why do you have to charge so much? And so I'm just trying to get it right in my mind. The $150, is that just for a permit? And what's that for? I mean, maybe the wrong person's not here.
I brought Stephen up to answer.
Yeah. In this particular situation, what this is really related to, not like really the county fair, but the fire code has a mandatory permit for fairs and carnivals. What this is related to in the fee amount is associated with the time that it takes us for the inspection, the planning meetings and things that we have ahead of time before the event. This really kind of covers the carnivals and fairs that take place across from the Speedway or anywhere else in the county. And the fee is very similar to the special events. It takes a lot of time to sit down with the event people ahead of time to kind of look at and determine their event and what all is going to take place and what type of public safety is going to be needed at that event. If they're serving alcohol, or based on the number of people, whether or not they need law enforcement, traffic, whether or not they're going to have EMS. So we spend a lot of time out there doing the inspections, because they have tents, they have all kinds of stuff, the food vendors, everything that has to be inspected. So, like he said, this is based off of the amount of time it takes to do all that. is kind of how the fees calculate.
Oh, I'm with you now. I fully understand it, and see, it didn't say that on this.
Yeah.
It doesn't take up a lot of room to say what you said, but it's better explained it so that I understand it now. But if it did pertain just to the county fair, I just wanted us to make sure that we pride ourselves in Cabarrus County for having one of the best fairs in the state. And I don't want to see us start losing vendors or start losing things because we price ourselves out of the market, if that was the case.
Yeah,
But that's not the case here.
No, the fees at the fair are not, the county does not buy a permit. And these are permit fees and staff time for them.
Yeah.
The fees at the fair are linear footage of frontage and of retail frontage for those booths and for those vendors that out there.
Right.
And that's pretty much based on industry average. I don't think we're any higher than anybody else. But however, we do have probably the nicest fairground out
Oh,
there.
yeah.
We bring in 90,000 or 80 to 90,000 customers to them for 8 days straight. So,
Right.
yeah, so I'm not sure which fees they're complaining about, but the only permitting out there would be the health fees.
I think that's where it was at, Mike.
Yeah, the health
Because
department.
I talked to the food vendors, that's who I talked with. It's got the little trailers that set up all along
Yeah.
the place,
But now, the county does charge per linear feet of
Right.
that trailer.
Right.
But
But this is different, though. and
there are, naturally, there's health inspections out there as they're
Sure.
preparing food and they're serving. And I guess, so the health department's got inspectors on site as well.
But
So-
what this is primarily referring to is EMS, fire department, and just in general, public safety.
Yeah, and like Mike said, with, health department, they're part of any of these events. There's typically food vendors, so we kind of coordinate all of those agencies and meeting together to try to help the vendors or the event staff in what they're going to need.
Right. And I totally agree with what your recommendations are. It's more than adequate.
Yeah, and like Chad said, there's certain things that, in this particular case, in the interest of public safety, to ensure that, they want to get that permit, we've recommended a different fee for it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So obviously, there's a lot of information, and we want to give you a chance to go through it and ask those questions, but there's also going to be additional information given to you. They're going to make recommendations, because that's what we talked about is, in some cases, those fees would move up so much we're afraid we won't get compliance. In other cases, there is, as Chad has talked about, there's a public benefit to it. Whether that be public safety, or it's a quality of life, or it's a local economy benefit. So we may not want to charge 100% on those. So they're going to go through all those and make recommendations to you based on that thinking.
That actually is what those 2 pages
Yeah.
are.
Yep.
Can you pull up the other one so we can just to be clear, so we have the spreadsheet that has all of the cost, and those are all at 100%. Is it? You have that one in there. It's probably down at the end of that, isn't it? 100%. So if it's not, well, if it's not on those other 2 sheets that were just shown,
It's gonna be around.
we're recommending 100% cost recapture. Most of building inspections is 100%. There are a few items, like I said, on that one sheet that we were just talking about, that are not 100% for reasons like we discussed. There are more in fire, for public safety purposes, that we're recommending a different amount. And so, just so you're aware of that, I want to make that real clear. If you have questions, don't hesitate to contact us, because I want you to fully understand the document. Yeah. Sorry, can't see very well from here. Just for instance, so an A1 type of construction, we have a chart that has 1,000 square feet, 1,500 square feet, 2,000 square feet. And it has the hours associated with each of those, and how long it would take us or fire to do that task, and it calculates out, and there's a ratio above for the areas in between. We're recommending 100% on most of those items. If it's not on those 2 spreadsheets that we showed first, we're recommending 100%.
When was the current fee schedule adopted? How old is it?
It was altered in 2008, but I'm not sure before that. Do you know, Jonathan?
It has been a long time in that structure. And we've come through and done some updates to it, but structurally, it's been that way going back 20 years at least.
So when the updates were done, some fees were changed, some fees were left on, okay.
And a lot of times we, like everybody else, look at what some of the other jurisdictions are charging, but the problem I have with that is if we're looking at that jurisdiction and what they're charging, and we move a fee, next year they might be looking at ours and move their fee, and then we're just,
Right.
it doesn't have any real basis to it. We're just comparing it to each other without knowing what our actual time and cost in that is. So that's what
Right.
this study has done.
Right.
It's given us that real estimate.
No, I think doing it this way is a good way to do it. The key word that Chad used earlier on was reasonable. And, you know, I've sat on that side of the table, and that's really all you can ask for. When you have a project and you want to do something, you just hope that when you go, that the structure and what you're dealing with is going to be reasonable. And everybody's definition may be slightly off, but that's what you're after. So if it's the cost of doing something and the developer understands that it's the cost of doing it, and I tell you from my background experience, that's reasonable. You know, if you're charging me 5 times what it costs you to do it, that's not reasonable. But the reason I asked about the fee structure and time is it, may be beneficial on that other slide, that if the fee at the time that it was adopted indexed for inflation, we may see, well, we're not charging any more than what when it was adopted in today's dollars. And, you know, and that way, that may make it pretty simple to say, well, yeah, look, we really haven't raised the fee. We're just indexing it to make sure that we're not getting behind.
Well,
For no other reason than time has passed.
Yeah, well, and the other part that makes it a little complicated is going to blanket permits. Now you're rolling the separate trade permits into that cost. So there's probably close to $150 in there of costs that were the other permits rolling into that larger permit.
So just to be clear, for a building, you're going to be pulling one permit for that building instead of pulling the building, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, all as separate permits, and they'll all add together. This is just one permit for that building, although it covers all those trades. That's a
Yeah.
very simplistic way to put it, but Todd did nod that I had it close.
Yeah, basically, we're going to have that permit and then roll out child permits under it for those others. But all of the costs will be in one place at one time instead of constantly dollaring people to death over each piece of it and who's responsible for each piece of it. All of it's paid up front, and they can charge it back to each other how they want to.
And it's also functionally a lot easier to follow a project. And I can tell you, if any of you have ever come and asked me, and I've tried to struggle through Acela to find the different permits, and I'm pulling up multiple permits, it structurally makes it a lot easier to look at that project to determine what its status is, what's been inspected, what hasn't been inspected.
Okay, any other questions or comments? I know one of the things that Chad mentioned, and I think it's been mentioned otherwise, that was when we met with developers, builders, I guess it's been 2 years ago now, the one clear message that they gave was, we want the process to move rapidly and efficiently, and, you know, we're not as concerned about the cost. Is just like Blake said, if it's a fair recovery of cost, they want us to charge enough to make that process work quickly. And of course, we got a lot of compliments that it does, and so I think we need to continue that.
Okay, so my goal is we'll try to hopefully schedule something before the July meeting. I'll have to see what their availability is. So we'll come back to you with comments, hopefully at that meeting, but if not, shortly thereafter. You know, if we have to, we'll provide you kind of a written summary of the comments. And in the meantime, as you look over it, if you have questions, please contact us. We want everybody to understand it. I think realistically, based on what Todd's experienced and all, we're probably going to tentatively shoot for a January 1st implementation. Actually, you know, we may try to adopt it before that, but have the actual date as January 1st, tentative to the progress that makes. So this gives us some time, but we need to go ahead and kind of get that pinned down, the structure pinned down, and also that they can proceed with their part of it, and know what we're gonna do, and we can figure out exactly when we wanna do it. So that's what I'll be looking for you all for next month, to kind of give me feedback as to whether or not, particularly on recommended things, whether or not you agree with that, whether you have alternate ideas, to give those to us next month so we can get everything in order for you to get it in a format that can be adopted.
And I'll make this offer for Kelly and her staff. If you want to meet with them individually, by all means, contact her and we can set those up. Or if you have any constituent groups beyond just home builders, if there are other contractor groups or other regular builders, other people who interact with us and pay these fees and they want a better understanding, by all means, have them contact us and we'll sit down with them.
Absolutely.
Only thing that I would ask up front, Kelly, is that we get hard copies of this because of the print is so small. If you could just get hard copies to us.
I will work with Lauren tomorrow, and we'll get you hard copies out. I
In our-
agree.
In our box or something, you know, we pick them up.
Yeah, it's, you should have seen the thousands of spreadsheets. So, we'll get it out to you. We'll get you a hard copy so you can kind of look at it and decide.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to, hopefully our Mount Pleasant Library folks will indulge us for a moment. We're going to skip on down to discussion items for action 4.1 and 4.2, as these involve the Cabarrus County School System, and they also have a meeting that begins at 6, so you're getting dangerously close to that beginning time. So
Yes, thank you.
we're-
Yeah. Getting a little nervous.
So if you would like to proceed with your first request for reallocation of funding.
Yes, our first request involves the allocation, there you go, of HVAC funds. You guys were graciously able to fund 2 projects for us, Mount Pleasant High School and J.M. Freeze Middle School last spring this time. And Chuck Taylor has worked to get those projects bid and undertaken, and so there's a little bit more to the complexity of that, and I'll let him explain that. So basically, at the end of the day, what we're asking is to take some funds out of one project, move it over to the other so that we can get to a certain phase through the project that we're comfortable with. There's a lot of details involved in that Chuck can talk with you about.
Sure. Given the current climate of construction right now, and I think we all are aware of the difficulties in today's economy, right off the bat, we ran into issues with bidding with the mechanical contractors, and we decided to go with mechanical contractors. We felt like that would be a better pricing option for us. We would get better pricing. It didn't work out that way. Unfortunately, the mechanical contractors right now are booked out 2 years. And what that caused was because of the issues with not enough labor, definitely not enough competent labor out there for them and their workforce. And the timelines that they're facing, we had to look at a different strategy to bid that out. In fact, the first bid that we brought in, we had one bidder show up. Obviously, we couldn't move forward at that point. We went back, used a different strategy, and we went to the manufacturers. When the manufacturers came in, they came in at a bid twice the allotted budgeted amount. Now, please keep in mind that we had priced this ourselves internally. Our consultants came in with almost an identical price. It was maybe a few $1,000s difference. So our budgeting was on target. However, the bidding didn't come in that way, and I do attribute that to the current construction climate and the issues that they're dealing with there. So using a different strategy, we went out to the manufacturers and we broke this up into different phases. So we split out the bid, and we did. On the first phase, we got very good pricing, excellent pricing. We're very happy. And we also utilized a pre-bid contract vehicle, or a cooperative purchasing. And doing that, we thought we had the key to fix this issue for ourselves. However, the next time we bid out the second phase, it came in at twice again the budget that we had set aside for that phase. neither time were we willing to accept those prices. You know, we also believe we have to be good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, and we wanted to make sure we protected that right. We were able to cut that price in half by once again moving from the manufacturers to smaller contractors. Having done that, we were able to finish phase 2 and 3 out of 6 at Mount Pleasant High School. Now, we were able to do phase 2 at J.N. Freeze. We had plenty of funding for that, but at that point, we ran out with J.N. Freeze with the funding that we had. There will, however, be some funding left over in the Mount Pleasant High School project that we could move to J.N. Freeze that will allow us to finish that phase 3, and we will be able to finish a partial phase 4 on Mount Pleasant and J.N. Freeze. I'm very comfortable with that. We will have an excellent product at the end of that. The few air handlers that we will not replace, we will do mostly in-house. We may be able to bid some of that out through the year, just depending on how pricing comes in on other things we're working on. We're very good at saving money in different places. And there was a phase 5 and 6, I want to be clear on that. When we did the first phase and opened up the piping, we were very happily surprised that the water treatment plan that we implemented years ago has really paid off. The piping did not need to be replaced. So phase 5 and 6 were replacing piping and replacing the lighting and ceiling grid where we would have to go in and cut out the piping to replace it. So those are no longer necessary, which is an excellent thing and brings us more in line with being able to utilize the funding that you provided, thankfully so, to bring those schools up to speed. And we are, as I said, very comfortable with where we're going to be. In actuality, the controls upgrade that we're implementing is going to allow us to, you spoke a little bit earlier about a dashboard. That's our goal. We want to have that common dashboard that all schools are linked to so that our technicians can go online and increase our efficiency and our ability to maintain the schools by looking at them from home before they leave to go work on these. Instead of spending hours traveling to and from and troubleshooting, they can do it from home and know what they need when they get there. These controls upgrades will allow us to implement that dashboard at some point and bring all the schools online.
Chuck whispered to me that he's ready for questions.
I don't really have a question, Chuck, but I remember I was on the school board when you came.
Yes, sir.
And and obviously not on the school board now, but I can honestly say that you have made a marked difference.
Thank you.
In the maintenance for facilities for the schools. And I just wanted you to know that I appreciate what you bring to the school system.
Thank you, sir. I believe that's probably more my team's.
Well, every ship has to have a captain.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions? I think it's quite interesting that we had our innovation report, which led into our fee schedule thing. Our fee schedule thing, the sample project that they pulled up that was red on the dashboard was that project. Yeah, so it's unusual how it's all linking together. Great. Anything else on that one? Okay, we'll move on to item 4.2.
You got another project on there?
Or did we?
Just the mobile unit
mobile units?
change
Oh.
of scope,
They're on
just
here
for
as well.
information purposes, we have that. Oh.
Yeah, that's, you've got the money for it.
Yeah, I didn't,
Okay.
wasn't aware that was on the
Money for it.
agenda.
It's just reconfiguring those mobile units based on the need to accommodate the classroom size.
Right.
Right.
So,
Requires no action on our part, right? From what I read, it said information only?
That's correct, yes.
I just wanted to let you know, it's the same amount of money, the same amount of units, but some of them are having to be reconfigured, walls moved around internally, so that they can accommodate the classroom size.
Right.
Then we'll take this opportunity to the Chuck Love Fest that Lynn started, I will continue on with, and if he's on board and says that can be done, I have 100% confidence, A, it's gonna get done right, and B, it's gonna be done in budget and correctly with cost, keeping cost in mind.
From the staff level, in our perspective, we echo that 100%.
Well, thank you very much.
Excellent.
I will try to live up to that.
Okay, now are we ready for 4.2? I'm trying to push this along.
Thank you, thank you. So for the second one, is this original funding for the new Cabarrus County Middle School? Cabarrus County Schools has had a need for a new middle school, and the land funding for the new site will be included in our 2019 limited obligation bonds that we spoke about earlier meetings. The Board of Education plans to open the school in August of 2022, and to prepare for the new school construction, some of the original engineering, architecture, administration, and preliminary cost, construction costs will need to be required prior to the issuing of the debt, which I plan to issue next May of 2020. To fund this $2,132,500 request, the Finance Department reviewed the prior 3 debt issues to see if funds could be freed up. Through interest earnings, contractor sales tax savings, and remaining funds when projects were completed, such as Royal Oaks and for the Performance Learning Center, we were able to reallocate the funds and set them aside for the new middle school request. And if there's any other questions concerning the need for the school or the timeline or anything, Ms. Klutz is here for us.
Okay, questions on that one? Hearing none, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll get back onto our original schedule now, and we are delighted to have folks from Mount Pleasant Library, Friends of the Library, Marcia Morris, and Martha Dobson, and Amber Pope, with us to talk about their project. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you for letting us be here. We're here to talk to you today about a proposal to relocate Mount Pleasant Library to the former Mount Pleasant Middle School site. And we think that this will accomplish several things. It will give the library the bigger space that it needs, a better space that it needs. It will add value to the community with increased access to facilities such as the gymnasium and auditorium that will remain. And we think it will save y'all some money. Today we are requesting $4,900 to match the same amount that will come from the Friends of the Mount Pleasant Library, to enter into a contract with architect Larry Schaefer to develop plans to ascertain the details of the former Mount Pleasant Middle School cafeteria to be repurposed as a library space. As I said, that will approximately double the size available for the library's use. We just learned today that this apparently was the first county school cafeteria in North Carolina. So it's got some historic value and interest. And we think that repurposing that space will, as I said, add tremendous value to the community. That site is important to the community. There's been a school there for a long time, and people have a lot of attachment to that space. So we think that that could be a win-win for everyone. I think you may have, I'm not sure what Emery Ortiz sent you, I think y'all may have seen the proposal that we have from the architect. We can discuss funding sources for his contract, and we have information from the library director, representatives of the Mount Pleasant Library Expansion Committee, and the contractor for the development of this property. The architect's contract with us expires June 30th, so we kind of need to move on this. And so this opportunity to reimagine the former cafeteria will disappear shortly as the development of that property moves forward.
I want to update you on a document I believe you received. It's dated December 19th, 2018. Do they have that? Is that a document that Emory sent?
I believe it's
Yes, ideas for the...
Yes, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that needs to be updated quickly with y'all. This document was prepared in December with that December deadline for your use at the January work session meeting, but the agenda was changed, so we were not here to talk about this. So there have been some changes in there. If you're looking at the page that says ideas for expansion, which is page 3, looking at idea 1, which was trying to expand the current library where it is. We tried many different ways to acquire more land for that, and that was not a possibility. Idea 2, where the current 8th grade hall is on that former middle school property, we talked to Tom Earnhardt about repurposing that space for the library, and due to their plans for the development as a whole, that was not a possibility. We were offered the idea number 3, to build a new building there where the school offices, like the principal's offices and so forth, were, and that was not large enough. Idea 4 was to build a new building on the little ball fields on North Drive, and this property is not owned by the former Mount Pleasant Middle School property. This is still owned by the county. And at that time, when we were preparing this document, idea 4 was the best of the 5 ideas that we had. Idea 5 was to build a new building on a walkable property in the town of Mount Pleasant. We have since investigated the 2 options that are described here, and they are not possibilities. So to further update this document, this winter and spring, it came to us that the idea of the cafeteria at the former middle school was a real possibility. The developer is truly interested in making this work, and in working with the Friends of the Library organization and with the county to make it work. And I want to, again, read on behalf of people who are not here. Emery is not here, so I have an email from her regarding her visit to that site. Tom Earnhardt is not able to be here, so I have a part of an email to read to share information with y'all about their thoughts. Emery had not seen this property, and so we arranged for a visit at the end of April for her to come. Tom Earnhardt was there, the architect was there to walk through, and we were there. Amber, Marcia, and I were there. And what I'm reading is Emery's email dated early May to Mike Downs, Jonathan Marshall, Kyle Bellifer, and copied to Stephen Mars regarding her thoughts after that visit to the middle school. I just want to let you all know that I met the Mount Pleasant Friends of the Library out at the old middle school to see the property and hear their ideas. It really helped me visualize what they were suggesting at the meeting we had a few weeks ago, as I had never been on that property. There are certainly pros and cons, so I wanted to give you my perspective on things. Pros: established community value from retrofitting a historically loved space, decent amount of square footage, and potentially enough to be what we need in Mount Pleasant for many years to come. Lots of potential charm in that space, depending on how it could be configured. Parentheses, I do love the massive quantities of natural light, close parentheses. From what I've read, it seems like there may be some funding potential from a gold leaf grant, parentheses, more on that below, close parentheses. Location seems excellent from the proposed use of the site, which is residential, business, and local traffic could all easily utilize the library. The use of both the gym and theater would present some very unique programming and partnership opportunities. Cons: obviously a lot of construction and updates to create a usable space. And I will say this was Emery's personal opinion versus a professional opinion, talking with the contractor or the architect. Another con: depending on the final assessment of what the square footage could be, it may not be the size we need, close parentheses, although that's difficult to determine now, close parentheses. May not have the ability to be as technologically advanced as we'd want a newer library to be. probably a leased space and not county-owned, parentheses, although that might be a pro in terms of cost, I'm not sure, close parentheses. Operational costs would obviously need to increase as we need more staff to cover that space. With the possibility of an established partnership with both the developers and community organizations like the Friends, it does seem like a good opportunity to look more closely at the gold leaf process. I know I have mentioned before that they've built libraries in the past, and usually ones that presented those kinds of collaborative setups. A stipulation, if I remember correctly, is also that plans be in place for things to be ready to proceed if a grant is awarded. Overall, I honestly do think it's worth $4,900 to fully explore that site as an option. If the county is willing to do so, It's difficult for me to tell if the pros or the cons come out ahead without knowing the full potential of what the site could be from a structural standpoint. Parentheses, I've got plenty of ideas though, close parentheses. It seems like a logical step to me, although I know there are other factors involved, but it does seem like an ideal opportunity with both the developer and the group willing to commit time and money to exploring the option. We've been talking a lot about innovation, and this certainly seems like it would fall under that realm without sacrificing the charm and sense of community that Mount Pleasant values. And that's an email from Emery Ortiz. From Tom Earnhardt, sorry I can't be there this evening. He sent this to me today. But let them know we are supportive of the library and hope we can all join forces meeting the needs of our community. I know at the meetings you have mostly seen the three of us, and you may think we are the only three in eastern Cabarrus County who are interested in this. So I wanted to share a list with you of our financial supporters and the members of the expansion committee, so you know it is more than the three of us. This list includes Janet and James Lentz, Ben and Janet Callahan, Sherry and Robert Krasinski, Scott and Sarah Avett, John and Tammy DeVito, Alan and Martha Dobson, Donna Carter of Carter's Place LLC, Don Klein of Klein's Country Antiques, Cynthia Simpson-Wise, Kay Beckett, Richard and Jocelyn Burleson, Sharon Perdue, China Garden, Terrence McManaway, Sheer Happiness, which is a salon, Mount Pleasant Animal Hospital, Laura Cook, A&M Printing, D&B Realty, June B. Moore, Thomas and Frances McDonald, Moose Pharmacy of Mount Pleasant, Sam and Risa Treadaway, Automotive Dent Solutions, Jeffrey Shilkowski with Well Doctor, 73 and Main Restaurant, Alan James of Two Allens LLC, Anthony Misaraka, Scott Behringer, Brent Cloninger, Mount Pleasant Friends of the Library Board, Marsha Morris, Susie Avett, Jeanette Wax, Amy Porter, Lori Love, Tim Wax, Amber Pope, Amy Burke. And we have a number of supporters who didn't give us their names, just gave us their money, as in $1,700 in one evening at the February 2018 annual Friends of the Library fundraiser play. Also, last fall, we went to talk to town staff with Town of Mount Pleasant, and they were not able to help us out financially. I went back this spring, mid-May, and asked again, and we now have a statement from the town staff, which says, Town of Mount Pleasant staff supports approaching the Town Board of Commissioners to request $5,000 during fiscal year 1920 in support of a larger library location at the old middle school site. Town staff will request that half of proceeds from ABC revenues be designated for transportation projects and the other half be designated for parks and cultural development. The town does not currently have a firm estimate on the amount of ABC revenues for the upcoming fiscal year. This information will not be available until October. Once revenues are confirmed, staff will request that the Town Board of Commissioners pass a budget amendment to allocate $5,000 from the Parks and Cultural portion of ABC revenues to support the Friends of the Library's efforts in working with Cabarrus County on a larger location in furtherance of the resolution of support that the Town Board passed earlier this year. Would you tell them about the news Emery shared with you last week about the funding that was donated to the county? So last week.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
We learned last week that there is some funding available, Emery shared with me, that was donated, she didn't know when, before she was here, that could be made available, that was designated for the Mount Pleasant Library expansion project. Our problem, or the big issue we've struggled with since we've been coming to you about needing a bigger library for Mount Pleasant, is that we don't know what it's going to cost. And nobody wants to put the money forward to figure out what it's going to cost. The money that we're dealing with is money that's been donated to us, and we don't want to spend that frivolously. And of course, you all need to be careful with money as well. Everyone does. So this is why we're proposing this partnership today, this 50-50 split, where we share the cost of determining what it would cost to put a library in the former middle school cafeteria. We really believe that this is going to be the most efficient and cost-effective way to get a bigger library for Mount Pleasant. And that's why we're so confident of that we are willing to put our share in, and that we hope y'all will match us, and then we can find out exactly what we're up against. Present that information, work with the developer to see what sort of arrangements. I obviously can't speak for him, but I know he would like to talk about a lease arrangement with a sale at the end of a long-term lease. But again, we can't talk any numbers until we know just what's involved. So that's why we're here today, to see if you're willing to jump off the dock with us, so to speak, and let's see what we can do.
Do we have the 3D model of the proposed plan?
Can you show the 3D model? We have, this is proposed 3D model of the development of the property. So the road that you see in the lower left is Highway 49, and the road on the right is North Main Street, to help orient you. And in the lower right corner, that's currently where the football stadium is. So towards the back of the property, you see a 2-story gray-roofed building. That is the gym, and that is intended to stay there. And to the right of it, there's a lobby area that would stay there, and to the right of the lobby area is the auditorium. Those spaces are to stay there and will be available for the community and the library to use. And when I say community, I do mean Cabarrus County as a whole. In addition to Eastern Cabarrus County, there's some interest from the Arts Council in bringing some performances into that auditorium space. And in that space, where I described the gym and the auditorium, there's also the cafeteria, kind of that white rectangle sticking out towards the back. So that would be the area of the repurposed space for the library. Parking will not be an issue. There is potentially space for later construction of a senior center that would be able to be close to the library, as well as close to those shared spaces of the auditorium and the gym, as well as the shopping and so forth that would be there.
We think that one of the strengths of this plan is that, in effect, you have a civic center, you know, that the government doesn't have to build, but that because Tom and his partners have kind of had the vision to see that Mount Pleasant and Eastern Cabarrus County can use an area where we can have people come in and perform. We can use the gymnasium, and the library seems like a natural fit to go in with that, because that's where not only can we have library programming and use those facilities, but we can also bring bigger things to the community and use that stage and really kind of make the best out of this piece of historic Mount Pleasant.
And if we can have that at a potentially lower cost, we're all for it.
Money sources, we compiled a list so that you would know what we know at this point. One money source is the donation that was made privately some years ago that Marcia referenced earlier. And that amount right now totals $9,740. The $25,000 and some dollars that the Friends of the Library Mount Pleasant Fund raised. Potential sale of the current library branch. It was valued by Realtor Debbie Fink last November at a value of $495,000 to $515,000. The $5,000 that I mentioned from the town, the possibility of the Golden Leaf grant, and actually two possibilities from the Cannon Foundation, because as library director, Emery would be able to apply for a grant, and as Friends of the Library, we would be able to apply for a grant. And also wanted to say, since the current owners of the property are allowing ball field users to park on their property, the $100,000 that was approved to make a gravel lot earlier this year is not necessary, and I understand from Tom that there's been some discussion with the county about that is not necessary to turn that into a lot because they're willing to allow parking on their property. So that money could be returned, actually not to be used for the library, but returned back to the $600,000 that was going to be designated for a park in Eastern Cabarrus County. We have Brian Seagraves, who is the contractor for this project and also involved with, if you have any questions about development or construction, Brian can answer those. And we can answer or clarify anything that we have said. It's hard to share all this in public comments, so we were looking forward to have a give and take with y'all.
I just wanted to add, Mr. Marshall and Mr. Billiver and I met with the owners of the property several months ago and talked about several different options out there. One being that they actually build the building and we lease it, which would take away the upfront cost of having to purchase the property and everything. And then it evolved into this conversation here with the cafeteria as well. Again, we all understand that we need this project, and I think that from these ladies' words, the community would like to have it sooner than later, and I know our library director would like to have it, but they also have other needs. I would recommend that you do allocate $4,900 of that donated money to do this feasibility study. But I just want you to keep in mind that you also have already charged us with finding property on the western side of the county to build the next library. So we just want to make sure that if we buy that property, that is what you had planned. So any rearranging of the construction of or upfitting of this would be counter to what your current plans are. And I'm not saying one way or the other, but I do recommend that you use the money to help study this project as well.
And I would also add that if you're looking at an arrangement of a lease, then you are not having to look at construction funds. And the funds that would be necessary would be for whatever goes inside of the library, the things that go inside, which is what the county's responsibility is for libraries, what's what's inside of it. And again, this is a project that could happen sooner, basically because if this doesn't happen, I'm just quite certain the developers will do something else with that space. It is a lovely space that has no, maybe one load-bearing wall. Load-bearing walls would not have to be built because of the prior construction with girders, thereby maximizing square footage in the building.
Well, I have
Yes.
no problem with the $4,900 myself. I'm good with that.
I would agree with that. We've had a lot of discussion about this, and it's, every time it kind of boils down to which comes first, chicken or the egg, who's going to step off the mark. So I think this is a great opportunity to find out just exactly what we're talking about. You know, we can't raise funds or come up with a strategy for a project that we don't know what it's going to cost. And so this will give us that information. You never know. There may be a good fairy out there that might just step up and say, I'll donate the money for that library. We've got to think positively.
There you go.
Well, and we are, but you're right. The point right now is we can't make a good decision on
Right.
whether this is a good decision unless we get the architect to make the plans and see if it's something that's going to work and what the potential cost would be.
Absolutely. Commissioner Shue, did you have something?
I was just rolling some thoughts by in my mind, you know, because we've talked about this for quite some time. I've attended your fundraisers and you know, I hear the reports that Ernie Morrison gives us. You know, he gives us reports about the library and the senior citizens and all that, so we know what's going on. You got a lot of activity about Pleasant, there's no doubt. But how does the square footage on what you're looking at this project compare to the Midland project? Do you have any idea, Mike? Do you know, or maybe Kyle might know?
Substantially larger.
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking that it probably was.
The current
the-
library that they have now is larger than the Midland
Right.
Library. However, their traffic is, they've got a lot more traffic coming through.
Right.
However,
Right.
Midland is already saying that they would like you to add additional days because their traffic is up.
Yeah.
The next, I'm trying to think, are those, in there somewhere, you've got the square footages?
Yeah,
of
the current
libraries there?
the square footage of the Mount Pleasant branch now is about 3,700.
Okay.
And,
But that's not usable, because it's more like, I think Kyle said it was like 3,500
Right.
usable.
and the potential square footage for the cafeteria is a little over, about 7,700
Wow, okay. Considerably bigger.
within its footprint.
And knowing that we will have access to an auditorium and a gymnasium as well, even though we might potentially want more square footage, knowing that we have access to those two facilities will compensate for that.
Mr. Chairman, I don't see this on consent agenda for next week, so are
No,
you
no,
asking
that-
us to take action tonight?
That was going to be my next question. I'm not sure exactly what is, since this is a special fund, do we include that on a regular agenda? Add it to our consent agenda to make this, to get the wheels in motion?
You have those three options. You can suspend the rules tonight and vote on it. You can add it to your consent agenda, or you can have more discussion at your next meeting.
Also,
Whichever.
if you're gonna match the 4,900, the professional fees also includes reimbursables, so you might want to consider a little bit more than 4,900.
I will make a motion.
And remember, June 30th is when the architect's contract.
I will make a motion that we
expires.
suspend the rules so that they can.
I would add about $300 or $400 for just reimbursables to that as well.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to suspend the rules, and we have a second. Any discussion?
We just need to make sure we do a project ordinance and a budget amendment, permission to do that.
Okay, great. So, all in favor of suspending the rules? All opposed? Okay, and now we can entertain a motion that includes everything that the $4,900.
I would do 300, so I would do $5,200, that'll give you $300 of reimbursable fees.
Are you going to use the $9,700? That's in the library trust fund.
Right.
Yeah, so we need to specify that it comes from the library trust fund, and does that still need those project, yeah.
I'll make that motion. $5,200 from the library trust fund for the appropriate ordinance and budget revision.
Thank you.
Great, okay, we have a motion.
Usually with a motion that long, it ends with subject to approval by county council and county manager. So we might want to.
Do you accept that amendment? And the seconder does as well? Okay, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes, and so we can get the wheels turning on that right away.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. We have 18 additional items on our discussion items for action, and we're in 2 hours and 15 minutes into it. So I would propose that we take a 5-minute recess and come back at 20 after 6. Okay, I hope everybody enjoyed that brief recess, and we will resume. And next up is Erin Shue from the Public Health Authority of Cabarrus County. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you. Good afternoon, good evening. I'm happy to be here. I am here to field any questions you may have about our changes to our bylaws. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. Essentially, we are asking for permission to go from a seven-member board to a 9-member board. The 2 additional positions will be a dentist and then also a school system representative. Our dental program is very large, as is our school health program and our school engagement programs. So we feel like those 2 representatives are a miss on our current board compilation. Mr. Morris is your liaison to our board. So our board met in May, reviewed this, and they have approved it, but it must come to you for final approval and adoption.
Yeah, I do serve on that board. I also served on the committee to take a look at these bylaw revisions. And so we did look at areas where we may have been weak on representation. We also looked at, we made some adjustments. In the previous bylaws, there were certain positions that were, there must be one position that's a member of this association and so we determined that a couple of those associations no longer existed from when the bylaws were originally written. So this just updates everything, brings it into compliance, and kind of makes sure we're covering all the bases. So I would recommend these changes. And I'm happy, in addition to Erin, to answer any questions you might have. And so are there questions?
Just one comment, just so we can have it for the record. Can you get us a red line copy of?
Sure.
Or just
Sure.
The changes?
Absolutely.
That way we can have it in the records.
Okay, anything else? All righty, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next item, 4.4, appointments to boards and committees. We have a number of those this month. You've all received a report with all of those detailed. Are there any questions, comments, or additions that you would like to make to those?
Mr. Chairman, the only comment I have is I looked through these, and I don't know how how we can do some recruiting efforts. But I noticed that a good majority of these, volunteers, in most cases, we have to do a residency deal because they live out of Cabarrus County.
Right.
They live in Mecklenburg County, Rowan County, places like that. And you would think that we could get some more of our own Cabarrus County people to volunteer to be added or, apply for these boards and committees that we do every month. So I don't know how to go about doing it. If that's something that we can do through our Channel 22, through our website, or something, but we need to try to get more of our own people involved in these. Not that the other ones are not doing a good job, they are, and I appreciate everyone that does this, but I sure would like to see us have more Cabarrus County people involved.
Right. Certainly understand what you're requesting, and we do have some vacancies on a number of these. I will mention that most of the positions that are folks that live out of county tend to be county employees that are in a specific position that dictates the need to have their membership on that board. I certainly don't want to call anybody out since he's sitting at the table with us, but Jonathan Marshall, we would welcome him as a Cabarrus County resident, but certainly understand his long residency in an unnamed adjacent county. But that's right. But yes, I think that certainly is a good comment and something we can pay attention to.
And I would add, like on the CVB board, those some of the hoteliers have properties in Cabarrus County, but they live in Mecklenburg or another place. So some of those I know relate to that as well.
Right.
Well, at the very least, I wanted the public to be made aware of it, that we need some volunteers from Cabarrus County.
Right. Very good. Okay. Any other comments or questions? All right, then we will move to item 4.4, or 4.5, excuse me, and these are the NACO voting credentials for the annual conference. I do plan to be at that conference representing the county, and I don't think anyone else on our board has indicated that they plan to attend. So it looks like if you would like to appoint me, we will include, I think that maybe is included in our consent agenda if everybody is okay with it. So that would make me the voting representative for Cabarrus County. All right, then we will move to item 4.6, purchase of right-of-way, Hickory Ridge Elementary School, and Jonathan Marshall will talk about that one.
Taking a beating tonight. These are the last two parcels owned by the same family, larger family, that we need to acquire. They are the largest parcels. It's over an acre. The price is consistent with what we've presented to you on all the other parcels for these water line and roadwork improvements. There are some complications with title, as I've mentioned in the past. Mr. Cook is working with the council for the school board on how to address that. The family has accepted the price, however, so that's why we brought this forward for your approval, as well as the budget amendment and the project ordinance amendment to allow for this. And that way we can then go forward with the schools on that solution.
Okay, any questions for Jonathan? All righty, very good. We'll move to item 4.7. We're happy to have Anthony Hodges with us with the HCCBG funding plan for fiscal year 20.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I did want to talk to you this afternoon regarding the funding plan for home and community care block grant for this upcoming fiscal year. As all of you are aware, this is funding that comes down from the federal government through the Older Americans Act, and then there's state funding added to that, and then there's, for this funding, there's a 10% county match. So that's one of the reasons we come to you. This funding is for programs and services that are for individuals that are 60 and older. And that's basically the only requirement, in that they need the service. They meet the guidelines for needing the service that we provide. And one good thing about this program, once it gets to the county level, the Home and Community Care Block Grant Advisory Committee, as well as you, the Board of Commissioners, decide which programs, which services to fund. Each county has that opportunity to do that. There's probably about 19 or 20 different services that we could fund, excuse me, and we fund about 10 in this county. And actually we probably fund a higher variety of services than a lot of the counties around us do fund. And just to kind of go over those real quickly, we do adult daycare and adult day health, which are both similar. Adult day health is a more intense level of care. In-home aid level, personal care level 2 and level 3, again, the same thing. Level 3 is a more intense level of care. Our congregate nutrition program, medical transportation, general transportation, senior center operations, housing and home improvement through our planning department, and then home delivered meals are the 10 services that we fund. The good news this year, and actually for the last couple of years, our allocation has went up. In some years, when I come and talk to you, we haven't received our allocation yet, and we're just guessing based on last year's. We have received our allocation this year, and it is our allocation before match this year is $883,247. So it's $23,395 higher than last year, and last year was about $62,000 or $63,000 higher than the year before. So after having several years of flat or losing funding, we've actually gained a little bit of funding over the last couple of years. Not nearly enough to provide for the need, but we have gotten a little bit of funding. What the advisory committee has decided this year, we met earlier this spring, and basically with that extra $23,395, the advisory committee decided to basically leave all the programs or services funded the same except for transportation. It was decided that the need in transportation was high enough, as the needs in all of them are, but the committee decided to add another $10,000 to general transportation, which funds our transportation for individuals going to our meal sites, and $13,395 to medical transportation. The other services remain the same. The only other change is that I did request the committee to change the amounts that we allocate to in-home aid, personal care level 2. And level 3, since more of our clients require the level 3 now, which is a more intense, more serious service. So we shifted the funds between that. It's still the same amount between those two, but just a higher amount in level 3. Otherwise, everything else is the same as fiscal year 19, except for transportation. And again, like I said, this is the allocation. As far as I know, we shouldn't have any changes, but since the state hasn't finalized their budget yet, there is always a potential that there could be either an addition or subtraction to these funds, but hopefully this is what it stays. Any questions?
Questions for Anthony? The congregate nutrition, that's the Lunch Plus funds, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I will say that I did go out to the opening
Yes, sir.
of the newest one at Bethpage Presbyterian Church a week or so ago. That's a great service.
Sir. Yes, sir.
Lively group of people. They have quite a bit of, I think the socializations opportunities for seniors is wonderful. So I think we're putting these funds to good use.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
In other areas as well. That's just the one that I most recently had an experience with. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Very much. And we move to item 4.8, Transportation Regional Transit Resolution. We're happy to have Bob Bushy with us for that. And associate.
This is Miss Eileen Tessier Gray. She is driver supervisor within our department. Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to come before you this evening. Cabarrus County has partnered with the City of Concord and the City of Kannapolis over the last 10 months to create a long-range transportation plan. This plan covers transportation needs for the next 20-plus years. During this study and in the planning process, one of the needs identified was the need for light rail and rapid transit into Cabarrus County. So what we have before you this evening is a resolution we are asking you to adopt in support of light rail extending into the Cabarrus County area from the CATS line. This is part of the process to prepare. It does not guarantee light rail. It does not obligate anybody to light rail. It's just a piece that will be needed sometime in the future if we decide to pursue light rail.
Questions or comments?
I think that one's a no-brainer.
There was a different, slightly amended resolution passed by the MPO board. Could we match that resolution? I don't have it in front of me. Jonathan, you know. Oh, no, you don't go to that one anymore. I'm sorry. There was a slight change. It doesn't change anything about the supporting it, but there was a slight change in wording. So if you could get that from Susie, probably has it, since she's the staff representative, and if we could change it to match what the other groups have
do you know?
Approved.
Do you know if did the City of Concord, City of Kannapolis amend theirs as well?
I don't know. I know that the MPO board
Right.
amended it based on staff input from Concord, Kannapolis
Okay.
County,
Hopefully
everybody
they-
that
great.
goes to the MPO, which would be all the municipalities. So I would hope that they approve the amended version, but I don't know what they approved.
Well, any other questions or comments? I think this is certainly something we probably should have done a long time ago, and I'm very much in favor of it. So we will, staff will take a look at those comparison documents and make sure we're all lined up together and proceed forward with it.
Thank you.
So, thank you. Next, you're still up, Transportation Title VI policy.
Yes, the North Carolina Department of Public Transportation, as well as the Federal Transit Administration, require all transit systems to update and adopt a Title VI discrimination plan and policy every 3 years. For the last several months, Eileen has been working with the state to make sure all the required documents were in place. So what we have before you this evening is our updated Title VI plan, and we're asking for that to be adopted.
Okay, any questions regarding that? And of course, we have that full document included in our agenda, which is somewhat lengthy, but compared to some of the other ones, not so much. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we move now to item 4.10, Cabarrus County reimbursement resolution for limited obligation bonds. Susan Farrington.
As we get closer to issuing the debt for the 3 land purchases that we've been speaking about for several months, the next step is to establish a reimbursement resolution. The resolution is included in your agenda package, and it will allow the county to pay excuse me, original expenditures, then reimburse itself for those expenditures when we receive the debt proceeds. We anticipate issuing no more than $11 million for the purchase of land for construction of a middle school, high school, and the senior center library. And the 7-year debt will include debt service payments of approximately $1.4 million per year, just to give you some updates. Some questions?
Okay, any questions for Susan?
Just to give you a heads up, we as you know, we found we are moving forward with the middle school property. We're moving ahead with the high school property, and we're still in search of that future library senior site. So if you talk to anybody in that area that has any potential sites for us, we'd love to be able to go out and look at them. So we're still in search.
Okay, well, we'll move now to item 4.11, also Susan.
Okay, the Finance Department annually reviews the revenues and expenditures for our health insurance fund based on actual activity and our anticipated activity for the remainder of the fiscal year. Budgets are based on trending claims provided by our third-party administrator, Mark III. This year, we've had a slight increase in our medical claims throughout the fiscal year. During 1 month, our claims were over $1 million. So at this time, we propose a budget amendment to appropriate $123,342 of fund balance and to make some reallocations of revenue and expenditure accounts to get us through the rest of this fiscal year.
Okay, questions for Susan? Okay, then we move to item 4.12, Juvenile Crime Prevention Council, allocation of funds.
Okay. Each year during our preliminary budget preparation, a final allocation of JCPC funding has not been determined at that time. So on August 21st of 2017, the Board of Commissioners granted the Finance Director permission to ability to sign for the funding arrangement and then to report back at a subsequent meeting. So for the FY20 JCPC funding plan, it was received from the state in May and was signed on May 16th. The funding plan is included in your agenda, and the FY20 allocation is also included as a final budget change, so we'll get that incorporated into the budget in the proper line items. So 6 entities this year will receive funding in FY20 to provide 8 different programs. Along with the Boys and Girls Club, the Conflict Resolution, Transforming Youth Movement, and the Rowan Youth Service Bureau, 2 additional providers were added this year, YDI Life Skills Academy and Thompson Rise, so 2 new providers that we have not used in the past. Just to give you a little bit of background, the YDI's Youth Development Initiatives, Life Skills Academy, and it will help establish and enhance the juveniles' decision-making and interpersonal skills, and the parenting and family building skills. The Thompson Rise program will assist older adolescents with things like building vocational skills and academic success. With the raise of the age legislation, which is effective in December of 2019, and the population that this agency provides, the Thompson Rise, they want participants to rise to above their circumstances and to achieve a successful life. So we did anticipate that need and wanted to provide some funding dollars for that additional age, for the raise the age legislation. Also in this agenda, if there's no questions about the funding, we also have a resolution that our JCPC Council wanted the commissioners to get behind, and it's also included in your agenda package. So in your agenda, the resolution supporting the expansion of the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council funding allocation. As stated, the raise the age legislation will become effective on 12/1 of 19. At that point, a juvenile will be someone under the age of 18 In the past, a juvenile did not include 16 and 17 years old. So raise the age legislation will increase the need for immediate and age-appropriate sanctions and diverse services for the juveniles in our area. The state JCP funding for Cabarrus County has been $310,611 for the past 9 years. So the passing of this resolution will hope the state will allocate more funds for the raise the age, because these sub-recipients providers will have to increase their services. So the resolution reads, Cabarrus County fully supports an adequate and timely increase of local juvenile crime prevention funding to ensure program expansion and successful implementation of the Juvenile Justice Reinvestment Act raise the age legislation set for December 1st, 2019. And that's included in your packet.
Any questions for Susan? I will say I serve on this board as well, and that it's a rather large board, and they have invested a tremendous amount of time and effort into determining these allocations. They've heard presentations from all these agencies. There's been quite a bit of back and forth and discussion. Susan serves on that board as well. So they do not take their responsibilities lightly, and they do a good job of making these allocations and then also of monitoring the activities of all these agencies throughout the year. So I think they make a real positive difference in a lot of young people's lives in Cabarrus County, diverting them from the justice system as opposed to making them permanent participants and residents in our facility across the street. So I applaud their work. Great. So no other questions? Then we will move to item 4.13, update of capital project fund budgets and related project ordinances.
Multi-year capital project funds are governed by project ordinances and are not included in your annual budget process. So each time the projects are increased or a new revenue is received in the multi-year fund, a budget amendment and project ordinance is presented to the Board of Commissioners and signed by the Board of Commissioners, the chairman. Per the ordinances, the county manager can approve reallocation between line items. So for tonight, we have presented in your agenda packet, based on our evaluation, some budget amendments and project ordinances, which should include our Fund 343, Construction Renovation Fund, our 364, our School Construction Fund, which is our non-debt, our 460 Fund, the Small Projects Fund, 461, our Sheriff's Fund, 532, our Agency Fund, and 534, our Cannon Memorial Library Fund, which we just spoke about earlier. So I have details on these different projects if you don't remember what they fund or if you have any other questions. But this is just an annual process where we get the interest earnings updated so we can spend the money, and just a good cleanup of the funds.
Okay, any question for Susan on those items? Okay, hearing none, we will move to item 4.14, updated capital reserve project ordinances.
And this one I did separate because our capital reserve fund, we use quite a bit to fund all our cash projects instead of using debt. So the capital reserve fund has has funding for several projects that are completed now within their respective capital project funds. So what we do is we take money out of the capital reserve fund and put it into the fund that where it's going to be ultimately spent. And when those funds or those projects are written off in their respective funds, then we need to go back and update the capital reserve fund and keep it more manageable and the project ordinance not quite so lengthy. So the enclosed project ordinance and budget amendment records the write-off of completed projects, recognizes interest earnings with a corresponding increase to available funds, and it also recognizes revenue received from the Convention and Visitors Bureau and a corresponding increase in available funds for our future sports facility and field expansion projects. Just getting that updated for this year. Some of the major projects that are included in your agenda that, just a note, that we've completed are the ODL 3 through 5 elementary school. Remember correctly, we completely paid with that one with cash years ago, and that's $19.75 million. And in our FY16 and FY17 mobile units, and we're also writing those off, and 2 school roofs are some of the major projects that we're writing off tonight.
Okay, any questions on that one? Okay, then we will move to item 4.15, deferred tax collections project request.
If you remember at the budget workshops, I was asked to go ahead and prepare the deferred projects that we had approved at the budget workshops. So this budget amendment and project ordinance gets everything recorded like we would requested. So during this will, just a reminder, this will use the deferred tax collections for our Carolina Farm Stewardship contribution of $80,000, our Camp Spencer vending machine building and overlook for $225,000, our Frank List Park water line replacements of $360,000, and our Eastern Cabarrus Parkland $1 million. So that's a total of $1,665,000. So the budget amendment and project ordinances are all included for your approval at the regular meeting.
Okay, any questions on that one? And of course, that is the deferred taxes from the present use land that has reverted back.
Correct.
Right.
After this allocation is made, there will be $1.3 million that's unallocated in that fund.
Okay, we will move now to item 4.16, offer for purchase surplus ambulance. Kyle Billifer.
Good evening. An offer of $7,150 has been received from American Transmed Incorporated for the purchase of county asset 8310, which is a 2013 Chevrolet G4 500 ambulance. I will not go in depth of reading the VIN number. The ambulance has already been replaced and taken off the road. The amount of money offered is comparable to what has been received in the past. In order to accept this offer to purchase, it is required to go through the standard upset bid process, where you all would vote at the next regular meeting, and then we would advertise for 10 days. Most of you should be familiar with this. About a year and 2 months ago, we went through the same thing. The offer was from American Transmed. It was lower than this offer was, and this is a very good offer and comparable offer to what we get at the auction houses for our ambulances.
Okay, any questions for Kyle? Very good. Hearing none, we'll move to item 4.17.
Thank you.
Interlocal agreement for mass notification services. Debbie Brannon.
Good evening. My theme tonight is multi-jurisdictional collaboration and innovation. This is to request you to approve the execution of interlocal agreements with the City of Concord, City of Kannapolis, Harrisburg, Midland, and Mount Pleasant. We are all going to be using the same mass notification services. About a year ago, Kannapolis came to Cabarrus County stating they didn't think they were getting value for the mass communication services that they were using. Kannapolis, City of Concord, and Cabarrus all used the same service. We weren't all on the same contract. So Kannapolis was interested in looking at other services. Cabarrus and the City of Concord, not so much, because we have a lot of integration with that service, the current service, but we started looking at different services and identified a service that is an improvement over what we're using now, has much as enhanced capabilities, and it's at a less cost than what we're paying now. So we've reached out to all the municipalities and tried to come up with a fair cost allocation for the shared service, and we based it on the population. However, when we based our unincorporated population and Concord's population, it was a little bit of unfair to the City of Concord. So what I did was I combined our two populations and split the difference for the cost in the end. So I think, Lauren, you updated it. Originally, I had the $50,000 on there. So we have executed the contract with Everbridge, and it came in at $47,595.52. We do have an option to renew the contract for 3 consecutive years after this. We don't have to, but that renewal comes in a little less at $43,995. simply because in order to execute and switch over and get everything configured, we needed a 13-month contract to start with, and then the subsequent contracts are for 12 months.
Could you elaborate just a little bit exactly what you mean?
With mass communications? Sure. We use mass communications in the public safety department to send out weather alerts or missing person alerts or, person of interest in the area. We also incorporate it with our library services. We do automated robocalls for books on hold and books overdue. Transportation uses it to send out a call the night before to remind people they have a trip reservation for the next morning. So that helped reduce our no-shows. And DHS uses it to call out when somebody's got a recertification coming up for their food and nutrition services, which was a big benefit for them, notifying people ahead of time so they don't wait until the last minute to come in. Also, they mail out the recertification notices, and their clientele are very transient, so a lot of times they didn't get that notification. Most people don't change their phone numbers, so the phone call goes out, and that's increased their recertification numbers. We use it internally to contact employees for, weather alerts if we're going to have a delayed opening, and to notify our employees of open enrollment and things of that nature. So there's a lot of innovation going on using the mass communications. And one problem that we do see is a lot of people do not have landlines anymore. So we'll be using more text messaging and email services with this new service as well.
Right. Okay, any other questions for Debbie? All righty, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item, 4.18. And I do not see Emery.
Emery's out sick.
Yeah, so we will
Did not see that she sent anybody in her place.
postpone this one to a later meeting.
Yes.
Okay, and then item 4.19 from the sheriff's office, and I do not see them here
This is,
either.
Hold on one second here. They are requesting the recognition of K-9 Jerry on his retirement as a bomb detective service dog due to his age and some physical conditions. They are recommending that he be retired and passed on to his handler, Lieutenant Jimmy Torelli.
And Mr. Billifer's come forward because we've been looking at this for a while and trying to decide how you handle a K-9 as surplus property.
Because he's an asset.
Does he
'Cause
get
he's
a
an
clock?
asset.
He actually does not have an asset number. Some of our newer dogs do, but we have already completed the surplus forms. So once the vote takes place at the regular meeting, Mr. Downs will handle that surplus forms as he does with everything that we take in front of you for surplus. And we've already gone through all of the agreement, and all the paperwork is attached to the agenda item.
Okay, great. Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you. And so we move now to item 4.20, general budget discussions. Kristen, do you have things for us? We may have things for you. So a friendly exchange.
Yes. Lauren is going to pass out 2 handouts for you all. One is just going to go over the final changes since I last updated you on that, which was at the Thursday budget work session. And then also a revised project list for the one-time funding with the 2-cent tax increase. So you will get both of those handouts shortly. Are there any questions to discuss while we're waiting? No? Oh, thank you for pulling that up, yeah. So I will say, I'll go over the large spreadsheet first, which is the ledger size paper that's color-coded with all of the final changes, and this is just the general fund budget final changes. And then we can touch on the smaller sheet, which is the proposed one-time funding projects that were updated. Oh, thank you both. Team effort. All right, so does everyone have a copy of the large spreadsheet, the final changes? Yes, okay. So I've stuck with a similar format as in the past. If you see there's, if you don't mind scrolling down, Lauren, on the spreadsheet, there's kind of a peach color that says after presented on the May 23rd budget workshop. That's just going to show you anything new that I added. So all of what was above that peach color, we've already discussed at the budget workshop. So the latest updates are the raise the age, which I know you heard from Susan in regards to the JCPC funding. So we did receive a memo from the North Carolina Department of Public Safety, and I presented an original figure at the budget workshop, and we received an updated figure that would reflect the county's estimate, and it came in lower than what we had budgeted. So in order to reflect that lower cost to the county, I'm showing the decrease in $28,875 there. And so those funds go towards the juvenile offenders that are not housed at our facility based on the new age requirement for the raise the age legislation. And those funds go directly to the juvenile justice system. As you just recently heard from Debbie, based on the mass communication interlocal agreement, we had some revenues set aside early in the budget process for the additional revenue that we would get from the jurisdictions. This is to reflect the cost that she just went over with you on the interlocal agreement. So you're going to see an additional $5,766 in revenue based on that interlocal agreement. So the $34,641, that's the reduction in that expenditure of the $28,875 for raise the age, and then the additional revenue of $5,766 for the mass communication totals $34,641 that we would put towards salary adjustments to keep updated with our current payroll. So when I pulled the salary projection in February, we've had changes along the way. So in order to stay current with live payroll, I wanted to show or put the remaining in salary adjustments. And then in the red there, I am showing, I believe it was part of one of the chair-vice chair meetings that the Cabarrus County School Systems requested to put their grounds money, just roll it into their building maintenance account, just for ease of helping them keep track of their projects. So you're just seeing that go in one account and out the other. So that's just more of an accounting fix, but since I'm changing the account numbers, I wanted to be transparent and show that. So if you implement all of those changes so far, you can see that the new general fund total would be $275,790,534. Are there any questions on those few changes that I made? So far, so good.
Looks good.
Okay. So if you...
Real quick, I assume
sure.
there was a reason they wanted to combine the two, which,
Yeah.
I mean, originally there was a reason why we had them separate, so.
There was, and there was, how many years ago was that, Pam? Probably 15 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, it was back when we started aggressively having construction, and we segregated building and grounds from the regular instructional money to make sure that money was being put in to prevent deferred maintenance from accumulating. And at this point, when you look at the building and grounds quarterly report that we receive, it's just a matter of, it's very similar to what they're doing with it, and it still restricts the money for building and grounds, so it's really an ease of accounting purposes for them.
Okay, any other questions? And now you're going to do the other sheet?
Sure. Excuse me. So I do have an updated proposed one-time funding sheet. And you can see, I just wanted to, the bottom line comes down to the $74,878 that we're showing in available funds based on the 2-cent tax increase. I do have the changes noted, highlighted in yellow. So again, overall, the cost didn't change. It's just after meeting with Cabarrus County Schools, how they wanted to redirect some of those funds for certain projects. For instance, I originally had in the top section for the school request for the capital projects for Cabarrus County Schools, I had a roof replacement for C.C. Griffin. And they requested that actually be a roof replacement for Mount Pleasant Elementary School. So that was actually a reduction in cost. And then you're seeing the other projects below, the tennis court resurfacing at J.M. Robinson at $30,812, the mobile roof replacement at Mary Frances Wall Center at $199,045. Roof repair at Concord High School at $88,615, and then the security vestibule was actually already included on the prior list, so that shouldn't be highlighted. But again, the overall funding amounts didn't change to my bottom line. It's just to redirect to different projects since the roof replacement for C.C. Griffin or for Mount Pleasant Elementary came in lower than the C.C. Griffin projected cost initially.
And their preference was to do the Mount Pleasant Elementary one because they'd already done the first phase of the engineering part of the study, and it made more sense to continue on with that project. And the C.C. Griffin was roughly around $1.3 million. So we just took the equivalent money and went down the list and picked some other projects off to balance it. So one of the projects that are down here, I think it's the roof at Concord High School, may not be the total amount of the funding for that request, but that's a partial in order to balance back to the dollars that we had available for them.
Okay, any questions for Lauren or Kristen? I'm looking
No,
at
that's
both
good.
of them.
We're the budget duo.
Keeping me on my toes, too.
Okay, I did want to mention one item in regards to the budget. At our last budget work session, we had a number of questions. I know certainly I did, and I think there were some other comments as well regarding the request for increased supplements. The questions that I had were primarily geared at determining some method of comparison between the counties that were cited to us as examples and Cabarrus County. And of course, my desire was to create some way of getting an apples to apples comparison between those counties as far as the various different areas of funding regarding local positions, supplements, and the things that, to see how we compared with those. As a result of those questions and questions, other questions that were brought up during the meeting, we requested a meeting, a chair, vice chair meeting with the school board. We were unable to coordinate schedules in such a short amount of time. We actually said we would like for it to be accomplished before this work session so that we would be equipped to come back and report back to the board what the findings of those questions were. As it turned out, Commissioner Honeycutt and I were both available to meet with county staff as well as school system staff. Their elected chair and vice chair were not available to meet them, but all of this information has been communicated to them, and I think there was some advanced communication. So I believe we're all equally informed. The school system did bring back some information about some of those other counties that we had talked about, and there are, well, actually I've got mountains of paper that is, I'm not sure I'm totally qualified to decipher all the results, but there are some answers to those questions and there are subtle differences between all. I would hope that between now and our budget process next year, that maybe we can not wait till the last minute and devote some time kind of coming up with some sort of methodology so that we can look and say, you know, from a total standpoint, this is what we're doing. One would think that some of the charts that are presented to us would tell that story. I have found that it does not. And I was in conversation with the superintendent of another school district, and just as an example, I asked the question, well, you guys on your supplement numbers on your principals and assistant principals are really, really way out of whack, or so much lower than what I'm seeing for Cabarrus County. Why is that? And he said, well, that's not really true. He said, we actually, those supplements are higher than that, but our methodology of how we report those or how we calculate those is not reflected in that chart. So that really isn't a true representation. And to me, that just kind of told the story, that those things that we see are not always good. But at any rate, we had a very productive, healthy conversation discussing some of those differences. And as a part of that conversation, the proposal was offered. We have, in our proposed budget, we have got a 1/4% increase, 1/4% increase in the teacher supplement, which is the amount that we have done each year for the past 5 years?
This is the fifth year.
Fi-
This is the fourth year.
Well, 4 or 5 years, whatever. Anyway, we had established that we had committed to doing that to get up to 8%. And when we agreed on that, I'm not so sure that 8% wasn't the state average, or are we?
8.5.
8.5?
And now it's 9.5.
Okay, yeah, so it's increased to 9.5. And of course, that's something that's going to continue to happen as others around us that we compete with increase their supplements. So the school system had requested us to go to all the way to the state average. We don't have the funds to do that. So we had the 1/4%. The conversation at the meeting we had the other day was if the county will increase their amount of increase to the teacher supplements from 1/4% to 0.5%, the school system will also contribute 0.5% from their fund balance, which would bring us up to a full 1% increase in teacher supplements in the upcoming year. Then in subsequent years, and this I read from their agenda, they are meeting at the same time we are, but what they propose there are Cabarrus County school funds, 8.5% to 9%. We did the 8 to 8.5. They're going to do the 8.5 to 9 to get us to the total percentage. It said using operational fund savings in year 2020-2021 and future years. So they would continue funding that 0.5%. So that gives us an opportunity to increase the teacher supplements a full percentage, which takes us from 8% to 9%, and that gets us 0.5% below the state average. And so the caveat from them was this will have to go before our board and be approved by the entire board. The caveat from our side was exactly the same. I said, we will take this before our board at our work session which is what we're doing now. And if our board is agreeable to that, then we can ask staff to amend our budget, which will be up for approval on June 17th. And that would be approved as part of that budget. So I open the floor for any questions, comments, or discussions that anybody might have regarding this proposal. And Commissioner Honeycutt was at the meeting. If you've got something to add that I might have missed, please feel free.
I think you covered it very well. I mean, I think we had really good, healthy dialogue, as you mentioned, from both sides. And obviously, we don't vote on this until June 20th, so I know there's been some emails and things that have come in thinking that we've already voted on it. But I think that was a good solution. I think everybody left the meeting feeling really good and excited about the possibilities of where we got to. So I appreciate their making the effort to meet with us in a timely fashion so that we could get to this point. The only question I have, is it seems like sometimes I see the state average is 9.25 and it's 9.5. Is it 9.5? Is that where it's at?
That's what we've been told.
Okay. I'm just thinking in some of the literature that where people
that kind of goes back to what I said about some of the charts are
okay.
difficult. The more you read, the more confusing it becomes sometimes.
Well, and I think the fact that we, had a plan, I think when I first came on in 2014, December, the plan was, and I think agreed by the school system and us, that the $0.25 per year for 5 years, everybody was happy with. And of course, as you said, while we've been doing that, everybody else has been going up. So that plan was great, but we're getting behind, so we're going to have to come up with something else. So if we can make this big a leap now, then hopefully that gives us some room to maybe get caught up in a few years for sure, hopefully. So anyway, I'm all for it, and I think it was a great meeting, like I said, and I appreciate everybody being at the table.
Yeah, tried to play around with the numbers just a little bit to see just exactly what this would mean to our teachers. I had given one, I think I gave Commissioner Shue a copy of an article, and I've got additional copies if anybody would like, of an article that was in the Charlotte Observer just today, talking about teacher salaries. And quite frequently, the General Assembly in Raleigh, those folks will talk about the average teacher salary, but it's just like these supplements. Yeah, that depends on where you are on the scale. I mean, there are so many variables that there are differing opinions on what the average salary is. I think they say 52,000, 53,970, and some of the other groups come back and say, well, it's not actually that high. But I was looking at a teacher making $45,000. Their state salary at our current supplement rate, that would be $3,600 a year. At this new supplement rate, it would be $4,050 a year. So that's about a $450 increase per year. You have to do the taxes and benefits piece of that and so forth, but the effective increase on the supplement, as we played with the numbers, was somewhere between 9 and 11%, depending on the deductions. So I think that's pretty healthy. I am certainly very much in favor of doing this. I think this is a level of collaboration between a Board of Commissioners and a Board of Education that is very rare in the state of North Carolina. So I applaud them for being willing to work alongside of us to remedy this situation. And so we do not have to vote on this, but I would like to have some head nods or consensus as to whether you would like for the budget to be revised.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, I think it's a good compromise for us to help bridge the gap and go toward them a little bit more. They had one caveat, and that was their board approval. I think we've got two. our board approval, but our board approval is gonna be contingent that the phraseology remains the same, that funding on their side is continuous into the future and not
Yes.
just a one-time thing.
Yep, and that was discussed, and that is written, and I would propose that that become a part of our record, should their, positions change, people change, so if we have that in writing and cover that. Okay, very good. Well,
I would recuse myself from any comments on that particular issue, as I am an employee of Cabarrus County Schools.
okay, understood. With the remaining 4 board members, I do see positive consensus. Did you have something else, Commissioner Shue?
I want to go back just for a minute with Kristen on an
Oh,
item on the one
okay,
time.
well, on that
But I
one-
didn't want to bring that up until we got through with this.
Okay, very good. So we will amend the budget to reflect this change, which we will have our budget public hearing and vote on June 17th. Correct. And proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kristen, I know you got a real quick answer for this, but on the one-time,
so.
proposed one-time funding,
Yes.
down under the county capital improvement projects, number 4, where we've got Camp Spencer, vending machine building, overlook, partial funding. So that's 200,000, but we're proposing 225 for that from the present use value. Is this in addition to the 225?
This is, so it's a
am I-
two-part project, so this is the remaining part. So the 225 is slated as a FY20 CIP, and this is to pick up the remaining portion of that project. So it was, I believe Kyle divided it into 2 sections. So you have the vending machine building and then the overlook part. Am I correct in that? You can probably do a better job explaining the project.
Yes, the Active Living Parks Department requested that we do a design and a projected cost of a 3-walled vending machine building, since they have so many campers there. And we did go ahead and do that. And then later on, after we had put the CIP in, the Helps Department had come to us and asked us for some ideas on an overlook throughout the woods. So I also kind of designed that and got an approximate cost on that. We put that into the CIP, and then they came back about some sort of archery building. So I kind of had to extrapolate what I thought that would cost based on what they were showing me. And then we had it all in 1 year, and when I was asked to break it up, I had to kind of go back. Mind you, these were years ago that we got these cost estimate to divide that up, so that's lumping that all together.
Yeah, and that's fine. Then, knowing that, my only question would be then, why wouldn't we just fund the whole thing through the present use value, the 225,000, with this 200,000? Why wouldn't we just do it all under the present use value? I mean, is there any reason why we wouldn't?
That is an option.
Because that would free up this money
That would free up that for
for
another.
something else,
So
that
it
we
would be a
could do.
total of 425 coming out of.
Because there's
the
like, I think Susan
present
said
use.
there's like 1.2 or 1.3
1.3.
still in there, so.
Yeah, yeah. That would get us down to just over $1 million.
Yeah.
So that's, we can definitely do that if that's what you choose to do. And then that would leave that plus the 74 to choose some other one-time projects.
I think that would be
As they
good.
rise to the top.
Yeah.
Is that-
Do we have consensus? Anybody in? Right? Okay, well, I think we're
I can
good to make
revise.
that change
Yeah,
then.
sure.
Okay, so that'll switch that entire project over to the present use value and free up this $200,000 for other one-time projects.
And I can see Susan nodding that she's going to change that other agenda item to reflect that.
In
And
project
that-
ordinance.
That agenda item can be changed prior to our regular meeting
Yeah.
to be included in the previous discussion. Excellent. Okay, anything else on the budget? Questions, comments, or suggestions? Okay, we thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is approval of the regular meeting agenda. Of course, you all have a copy of that before you. I think the only item that we discussed that was not on there, we suspended the rules and addressed the Mount Pleasant Library study funding. So it.
And taking out the presentation of the strategic plan under the consent agenda.
That, yes.
The library.
Library, 'cause so
Number
that.
24.
Which one?
Number 24. F-24.
Do you want to
Yeah.
allow her to present it at the regular meeting? Just put it on new business?
Or we can move it to the next month's.
Doesn't matter to me,
work
but it just
session.
doesn't need to be
That
under
might be a-
consent.
Let's move it to next month's work session. if that's
Because
okay.
she had it effective July 1st in her agenda item.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's the effectiveness of it is.
I'm just
Yeah.
making a statement.
I would recommend you do it at your July work session.
Okay, so we will remove item F-24 and move that to the July work session. Any other changes? Then I would entertain a motion to approve the regular meeting agenda with the removal of that item and also including setting a public hearing for an EDC allocation at that meeting as well. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. We do have need of a closed session tonight, so I would entertain a motion to go into closed session to discuss pending litigation and economic development authorized by North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3 and 4. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. We are now in closed session. Thank you.